right. With that, it's 4 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the regular town meeting of the Frisco Town Council. May I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen.
Here.
Aronson.
Here.
Burley. Absent. Fallon. Dan, you're frozen and muted. I will come
Here.
back. Oh, thank you. Once more, please, Dan. Held.
Here.
Incan. Absent. Sherburne.
Here.
And we did hear Councilmember Fallon. He will be back. Connection issues.
Yeah, I assume he will be logging back in momentarily, hopefully.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We've got Dan. All right. Is your connection good? Can you hear us okay, Dan?
On my backup network, so we'll see how we do.
All right. Your audio is good, so appreciate that. Before we go on to public comment this afternoon, I'd just like to take a moment on behalf of the town of Frisco to extend our sincerest and most heartfelt sympathies to the city of Boulder and to all those involved in yesterday's horrific accident. We are all a close-knit community in this state, and that hits home all too much. And I'd like to take a moment, have a moment of silence in memory and in honor of the 1 police officer and the 9 individuals who were killed yesterday. So if we can take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I appreciate that. Moving on, I'd like to open it up for public comment this afternoon. Is there anyone who wish to make a public comment? Please do so now. Be topic specific for anything that is not on this evening's agenda. Please state your name and your address, and we'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. If you'd like to do so, please raise your hand. I see a hand is raised. Hayes, if you're able to unmute yourself, please.
Yep.
Hey, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes. And can you again, please state your full name and your address, please?
My name's James Hayes Walsh. I live at 223 Creekside Drive here in Frisco. First, I wanted to thank y'all for quickly making a decision on proceeding with the Main Street Promenade this summer. I'm here today to encourage you to take it a step further and consider the idea of making it the promenade permanent, running annually from June 1 through September 30th. Bottom line is that a main street designed for pedestrian use is an improvement that benefits people who live, work, and recreate in Frisco. The promenade encourages locals to walk, ride bikes, and use Summit Stage because there is an overwhelming focus on pedestrian safety that makes it comfortable. I want to build a community that's focused on the people who live here. Creating this type of comfortable environment encourages homeowners to spend more time living and recreating in Frisco. Ideally, the people who own the property would be the people living here. As a property manager whose job it is to maintain individual personal relationships with 40 different ownership groups, I can tell you that owners are attracted to pedestrian accessibility. It's a luxury. Furthermore, business is booming in Frisco. We have Whole Foods. Residential property starts at $800 a square foot. A pedestrian-focused downtown is a proverbial golf course for people to engage and interact with each other. People here have capital and ideas. My point is that creating a pedestrian-focused downtown with a safe, comfortable vibe makes Frisco a better place to live. And if the goal is to offer people who own property here incentive to spend their time living, working, and recreating here, making Main Street Promenade annual is an opportunity to clearly express that intent. That's all I have to say about that. And thank y'all.
Thank you, Hayes. We appreciate your comments around the promenade and looking towards the future. Thank you. there any additional public comments this afternoon? I am at this point seeing no other comments. If I'm missing anybody, please speak up now or hit the raise your hand feature. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and move on to council and mayor comments. Council, anyone have a comment this afternoon? Melissa, hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take a moment and recognize the Girl Scouts. So in past years, we've had the Girl Scouts, various troops show up to our meeting. March 12th was Girl Scout Day, and I believe we've proclaimed the month of March Girl Scout Month in the past, but my daughter is no longer a Girl Scout, but has been for many years, and now has moved on to other things. But I want to recognize their importance in our community and all of the wonderful things that they do for our young girls in our community, and of course the treats that they provide all of us. So I'd just like to recognize them, and hopefully next year we can have them in person. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. Yep, and we have done Girl Scout Month in the past. I appreciate that. I know we're waiting on, is Dan back? It jumps around my screen a little bit.
Mayor, he is thinking he has to relocate.
Okay. Other council comments, Andy, Andrew? I just know, again, I appreciate all of town staff's work getting us through spring break. The crowds are here. The snow is also here, which is good. So I appreciate that.
Hunter, I feel like you're going like this as we wait for Dan to relog in. So
doing what I can, but if
I will remind the 35 people that the only thing we can guarantee right now is that the ice on Lake Dillon will melt, and you can pick up an extra $4,000 if you guess the right time. So hang out with your favorite Rotary friends and family, or me if you don't know anybody else, and place your bets. It's that time of year.
a great tradition. We will, well, Dan's working on it. We'll move on to staff updates.
Mayor and council, the staff updates are in the report. I don't have anything extra at this time.
Additional? Excellent. This is it's getting harder to drag it on waiting for council member Fallon.
I think it's an actual physical relocation, so you might want to just go ahead.
All right, then we will continue on. Thank you. I didn't pick up on that. So we'll move on and start our work session and agenda item number 1. And this is the 619 Granite Street Workforce Housing Project and conceptual design update. We'll open up the hearing and turn it over to staff. And I see Don is on. Don, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for this opportunity to give you an update on this exciting project. We've had a great team moving through and getting to a conceptual design that we'd like to present to you this evening. On the town staff team, it's been myself, Eva Henson, Susan Lee, and Gilly Plog, as well as council members Melissa Sherburne and Andrew Aronson have been actively participating in getting us to the conceptual design standpoint. From our partners at CDOT, we have on the line David Fox and Aaron Ross, and then our studio architect team includes Tim Ross, Jeff Dawson, Andrew Zedeklik, Chris Russell, and I believe there's a couple group from our cost estimating, which is a very important component of this as well, Taylor Kors, which is Leah Jones and Trevor Vance. And so again, the purpose tonight is to really go through how we developed the conceptual design that we're presenting, how we would like to move forward, give you an overview of it, and gather any input you have. Are we headed in the right direction or not? Next steps in this process will be submittal of a sketch plan for Planning Commission to consider, and then followed by the major site plan review. Again, the timeline on this under the contract that we have with CDOT is that we're to get to 80% construction drawings by December 31st, and we are on track to meet that target. With that, I will turn it over here to Chris Russell, who is the project architect for Studio Architecture, and I believe Chris may, there he is, he popped up onto the screen there. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you. He does have a presentation for you this evening that'll go through the conceptual design and again, highlight how we got there and some of the key components. So Chris.
Thank you, Don. Can everybody hear me? Things working correctly? All right, great. And I'm going to try and share my screen here. Seems like that is working as well, correct? All right,
Yep.
great. All right, thank you, Don, for that intro. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for taking the time this evening to review our proposal for the Granite Street workforce housing. We're excited, I think, as a whole entire team. This is a great opportunity to provide much needed community benefit of affordable housing on a great site in downtown Frisco. And as Don mentioned, we've had a lot of brain power on our team for the past couple of months with representatives from both the town of Frisco and CDOT providing insightful and beneficial feedback, information, and ideas. So this first image, I know it's a hard thing to do, but tries to summarize graphically the iterative process that led us to the concept that I will be presenting to you guys this evening. We started with a lot of goals. Some were more defined than others, and all, at first seemingly to be at the top of the list, right? Top priorities. And we at Studio initially presented a few different building concepts. As you can see in the bottom of the slide, we presented a townhome style. We presented a tuck under style that's more of a corridor loaded typical apartment building. And we also looked at a walk-up style that I'll be presenting to you tonight. And we did this to try and meet as many of those goals as possible. Through our weekly virtual meetings with the Frisco and the CDOT teams, we started to massage each one of these concepts and identify where each one excelled and where each one fell short. And through this process, the top 3 goals for each team seemed to bubble to the top and become pretty clear. And those are the goals at the top of the screen here. We first identified for the town of Frisco, the number of units, that being the top priority, the top goal, followed by affordability, and that means construction and maintenance, and sustainability with their net zero ready requirement and vision for the future. CDOT's top 3 goals, you'll notice that we shared the top 2 between Frisco and CDOT, which was pretty nice. Affordability bubbled to the top for CDOT, and again, construction and maintenance of that. The number of units, our target, it's worth noting that our target was 20 when we came into to the project. And livability, and a big part of that is parking. So CDOT identified that it wouldn't make much sense to ask for parking reductions when it's a very car-centric use for this project. So because of this process, we also identified that the walk-up building, as you can see in the bottom of the slide, that concept met the goals without asking for a bunch of code waivers and modifications. And without going into too much detail of the other ones, the townhome style, the affordability just wasn't there. It excelled with livability, but the affordability just wasn't there. The tuck under style, the typical corridor loaded option, we were able to create a lot of units, but the affordability again wasn't there and the livability wasn't there. We all agreed as a team that the option that I'll share with you today with more of a direct access is a more livable product than the tuck under style. And it's also worth noting that the townhouse and the tuck under style would have required us to ask for a lot of building modifications. So our goal tonight, as Don, just to kind of reiterate what Don said, is to get council's thoughtful review of the concept, identify any shortcoming of the design, and identify any opportunities, for improvement, and ultimately come away with council's support to move forward with the concept as the best solution for the site that we, presently believe that it is. That's a lot of talking for the first slide. Sorry about that. Second slide. This is the walk-up option. This is more of the numbers. Our target was 22 unit. Our target was 20 units, and this option provided the 22. And it's worth noting here that unit diversity kind of bubbled to the top of the list as well as one of the goals. We're able to provide a studio, a 1-bed, and a 2-bed, and you'll see those in the plans in just a moment. Parking summary, again, as I noted earlier, we are able to meet the required parking on site, and that's for tenants and guests alike. We actually have the one extra space, the bonus space. And we will also be able to provide the required bicycle parking as well. And something that we're going to have to massage a little bit later are, where the capable and the EV ready spaces go. We've identified those on the plan right now, but those will be massaged as we figure out how to manage the parking. Another big issue that this design presented was the ability to provide all of the snow storage on site. The previous two, the townhome and the Tuck Under buildings, we would have had to ask for a modification for that. And I'll show you how this concept satisfies that requirement in just a moment. First floor plan, this is where a lot of the action happens. You'll notice it's a walk-up style. There are no elevators, and that's in an effort to reduce cost over the previous two, the two options. There's no corridors. Again, reduces the common space, the cost of those, and it makes the livability, the feel of the units as you're walking into your own unit. The parking, again, meets standards. We have 33 spaces on site. We are utilizing tandems. As you can see, those kind of noted with a 2-bedroom label. Those would be for parking for the 2-bedroom units. EV charging stations, of course, or the capable and ready spaces have been identified, but again, those can move, but we will meet that requirement as well. Carports, very important to this design. They do essentially 3 main things. They reduce the need for snow storage on site, and the snow storage is the dark green there. It protects the cars from the elements, which supports the livability goal. And it provides an opportunity for photovoltaics, which supports the sustainability goal from the town of Frisco and CDOT. Level 2 here, not a lot to note. We are stacking the units. So there are 5 1-bedroom units, and the darker blue are the 2-bedroom units. So in an effort to reduce cost, we stack those straight up. Have stacking walls there, not a lot of gymnastics there. And you can see the carport roof below with the opportunity for the PV, the photovoltaics on that northern carport. Level 3, this is, we went back and forth as a design team, on how this level 3 should look and act. One of the main drivers here is that setback, the step back, the 10-foot required step back on the 3rd floor, which this honors. So you'll see in a moment when we get to the 3D views, how that, really helps architecturally along those street facades along 7th and Granite. But up on the 3rd floor, they're all studios and 1-bedroom units. Here are the pretty pictures. From Granite, this is a view looking from Granite and 7th Avenue. We're doing a few different things here architecturally. You can notice that it's more of a 2-story feel because of that step back on the 3rd floor. It really fades away. We do have balconies facing the street for livability reasons and for architectural character reasons. We'd have entrances on the ground floor to present the entry to those units to the street. We have pedestrian scaled windows. We have pedestrian scaled massing, something that, I think we've massaged to relate to the context and, the neighborhood in general. The bulk plan, worth noting here, when we get to the design review committee, this is something that we will have to ask that they allow a very small encroachment into the bulk plane, but nothing significant there. Sorry about that. The Paseo, this is essentially how we're treating the corner. A lot of effort was gone into to treating this corner, the 7th and Granite Street. We kind of put our shoulders, the 2-story masses, the shorter masses along this corner, create a nice Paseo through the project into the parking beyond. Here is an elevation along Granite Street. It's worth noting that the 7th Street will be essentially almost identical to this in an effort to save on cost there as well. You can again see the step back on the 3rd floor, which provides the opportunity for even more photovoltaics facing south. Some good orientation there. And that setback 3rd floor reduces the apparent mass on Granite Street. This is a view of the alley. You can see there's not as many gymnastics going on back here. It's 3 stories straight up. It's a more cost-effective facade, along the parking area. We do utilize those carports. Again, for snow storage, for PV opportunities, and just to protect the cars as well, for livability for the tenants. Quick overview, not that we have to get into the unit layouts here, but something that we worked on was providing additional storage. That's a pretty big benefit to those and those outdoor activities that everybody enjoys in the town of Frisco. So we've tried to identify a little more than typical storage areas in each one of these units, but you can see the diversity between the studios, the 1 beds and the 2 beds that this project gives. And that's the majority. Try and get it in a nutshell are all the architecture and what we're doing on site to meet as many goals as possible. This last slide, again, are the numbers. And one thing that I've highlighted, we can dig deeper into that. We do have Taylor Coors available today to dive deeper into these numbers. But what I've highlighted is that we are in the range for what we are seeing for these cost per unit for affordable housing. So the big question is, yeah, you see all these numbers, but what does it all mean? How does it relate to, a typical affordable housing? And so we are right in that range as well. So with that, I really want to open it up to you guys for questions, for conversation. I'm here to answer as many questions as I can. I think before I do, I think we need to toss it to Aaron with the town of CDOT. Aaron, would you like to talk about this concept?
Hi there, I am Erin Lucero. I'm the lead architect for CDOT Property Management, and I just wanted to kind of throw in CDOT's thoughts and support on this project. I know we've been working with the town for a number of years on trying to figure out how to use this CDOT parcel to develop housing, and we're really excited that this is happening and that this is moving forward. Chris has done an excellent job setting our goals, and we use those goals really to vet those different options that he was talking about. And one of the things that CDOT plans to use for this housing, if it moves forward and if it gets built, is to have housing for our CDOT employees, and that's why livability was important for us, and also making sure that we had enough parking for all the units, because most of our employees and a lot of people, they have cars to get to work. And so that was an important thing. This option that Studio Architecture put forth for CDOT really ticks all the boxes, we think, of affordability, very simple, straightforward design that I think also is elegant and seems like it would work for what we're trying to accomplish with that. And they've been looking at, I know that, and Gilly will probably join after me, this CDOT and, well, the state of Colorado has the governor's greening initiative where we are obligated to create LEED certified or, equivalent buildings that are sustainable. And that's something that we're working towards on this design as well. And I think Chris has been kind of creating some preliminary scorecards, and it appears that we're on track to do that. And he's looking at some of the PV. So we're real pleased to see where this project is going, and are very happy with this design that is coming along so far. Were we going to have Gilly make a statement on sustainability? That's something that I'm forgetting. Was that, were we going to have her do a quick chat?
I think this is a great time for that. Thanks, Erin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
everyone. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, I just wanted to point out to council that I have been involved in the design conversations from the beginning, and the design that the studio architecture group has proposed, it definitely meets our zero energy ready home requirements, as well as the new sustainable land use code when it comes to EV capable and EV ready charging spaces. And because we are partnering with CDOT on this, their LEED Gold requirements definitely put this building above and beyond what a normal building constructed under our new sustainable building code would need. And as Chris pointed out, the carports for that provide the additional spaces for the photovoltaics definitely allow for future opportunities to make this building fully net zero at some point. So I just wanted to point out to council that we have thought about the sustainability and environmental design of this building. And I think that it is definitely on track to meet both ours and CDOT's goals.
So with that, Chris, unless you or the studio team have some more comments, or I'd like to turn it back over to the mayor and council for any questions they may have for the team, or suggestions, or anything else.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Chris and Aaron and Gilly. I appreciate the presentation and the thoughtfulness, and it's a lot more attractive than what used to inhabit that lot. That is for sure. Chris, do you mind just, it's easier for me if we could just go back to, if you could stop sharing your screen just so we can see, maybe we'll bring it back up if council has specific questions.
Yeah, let me just find the button here.
Found it makes the conversation flow a little better. I'd also like to just really thank everybody on the team who's been involved, as well as Councilmember Sherburne, Councilmember Aronson for their input and kind of helping with this project. And I'd like to maybe start with them and see what, if they have thoughts they'd like to share or fill us in on their side of the conversation or the planning process.
I'm happy to go. I want to first thank staff and the studio team and CDOT. You guys have done some really amazing work in a really short amount of time. I've had a really limited amount of interaction due to scheduling conflicts and whatnot, but every meeting I'm really impressed by how prepared you guys are, the level of product that you put forth even just at the meetings. So with that, I think, when we started this, the big question for me was, how can we serve the greatest number of people? And I think that the diversity of the unit mix that you've designed really checks all the boxes, as Aaron pointed out. So I feel really good about that. I also think that it serves that block really well. And so the L shape of the design right up to the, not the edge of the property, but sort of framing in the property looks really nice and kind of adds to the density and the rhythm of granite that we're seeing. And so I think it continues to sort of fill in that, really that urban corridor that is taking shape and has been taking shape for many years along Granite. So I really like that. I really appreciate also that they did incorporate a third level in a really thoughtful way that respects our town code and provides, it was a big topic of conversation a few years ago when we went through our code updates to make sure that things weren't looking too uniform and the massing wasn't too much for that corridor. So by stepping it back, but also providing the diversity with the studio units, I think is a really great thing. So thank you to Studio for incorporating that. The carports I actually like because it makes not only for the functional reasons that you all have mentioned, but I think it gives that space a little bit more of a sense of occupancy or a sense of place, if you will. So for, people that are traveling from different directions, you can really tell that people live there. It's not a vacant parking lot. I also think that it has huge benefits for the people living there. So I do like the carport. The balconies, I know there are balconies on the front side. And I don't know, these are my last two comments are very, very sort of putting on my former planning commissioner hat. And that is on the balconies, the best views are to the back of the building and overlooking the carports. And so the studios, especially, looking bam right out there at Mount Royal and the 10-mile range. I mean, it's really outstanding views. So I understand it probably is cost prohibitive, but perhaps a balcony on the backside for the studio units. I think they're too integral to the design on the front side for the other units, but just something to contemplate. And then let's see, I realize also this is just sort of broad brush, no colors yet. I would love to see some modern elements on this, and seeing it in black and white looks a little bit like sort of traditional condo type development. And I would love, I know you guys have the skills and the design aesthetic, and I can't wait to see the next round. But I'd love to see that very traditional roof form and pattern that we see in the design sort of taken to the next step with modern elements to elevate that block even further. So, but overall, I think this is headed in a really nice direction. So that would be my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate all of those comments. Andrew, did you have any? I know you've been a part of this for a while.
Yeah, it's been a really good series of weekly meetings with a lot of progress and a lot of good, productive conversation. So this wasn't their first draft, but this is where we got to, and that's the way the process is supposed to work. I feel like a lot of times I'm the voice of budget, and so there's a fair amount of bells and whistles that were probably considered, and we need to stay realistic because every time we talk costs, they're ridiculous. And so that is a factor in most of the conversations, and I respect that. I think I'm being heard in my budget conscious. This is what it is, and we have to be mindful of the taxpayer dollar. So I'm really excited. Bottom line is we've come to a really good point to say, subject to what everybody else's feelings are, let's go. This is something we need. It's something that is turning out to be really, really a good thing.
Thanks, Andrew. Andy, how you feeling about it? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everybody. Greatly appreciate all the time everybody's taken to put into this. I'm excited to get something in that location that's going to be affordable housing. So I appreciate it. The few things that really stand out to me, love the balconies. I think that's great. I agree with Melissa on the backside. The door to the railing, I feel like never works in whatever case that's going to be. I'm sure with the number of affordable units we're getting, I'm sure we can do something about the bulk plane. That's probably not an issue. 952 square feet for a 2-bedroom is a lot. Perhaps something could be squeezed down and we can even get one more unit. Something like that would be awesome. Individual units all stacked together. I would hope that soundproofing would be a major focus because in affordable units, most of the time, that's not a focus. Let's see. Like Melissa was saying, I don't want, and just in black and white, obviously you don't get the whole picture, but I don't want this to scream suburbia. I really think, our mountain look, and I'd love to see more contemporary design. Contemporary mountain design is the future of this place, instead of kind of doing the same thing that we've always done. And with that, a lot of the gables, hips and valleys and all, I see some serious ice dam issues going on here. And it might be a mechanical door where it's all spilling onto, but that's major problem right there. So just beware of that. I think it could even be handled with a more contemporary, single plane would be easier to build instead of, gable sort of situation. Let's see here. I appreciate you striving to exceed, the LEED standards. That's just great. I think everybody should do it. And with that, I think that's about it. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Andy. And I know Councilmember Fallon is listening in, and he has gotten the message to me that he has no comments at this time, but there'll be other additional abilities. I just, to everything you've heard so far, I agree. And I think Andrew's point was probably the best one. Let's get going. I think it looks great. I think some of the nuance is why we have the great team assembled. I'm with Councilmember Held on the soundproofing aspect. I know, Andrew will cringe a little bit. That is where money needs to be spent. We need to make sure that these are units that anyone who's on this screen would be happy to live in. And I think that's what makes a community in a town. And I think that's incumbent on us to not cut corners or costs in that part. A question doesn't necessarily have to be answered now by anyone on the team, but just looking forward to, I didn't see, I'm assuming the size of those carports are such that the person with the truck and the box on top and the ski rack and bike rack, bikes, hopefully we won't have any bikes hitting the carport roof, but that it's high enough. And also, does that also become added storage for those units? Because I know in Summit County, toys are hung from the most amazing creative places possible. And I want to make sure whether that's taken into account or not, that it won't catch us by surprise when this does start leasing and getting people living in this unit. But otherwise, I'm in full support of all mentioned comments about the look and the modern mountain feel to it. I think the accessibility and feel to the town and the character that you guys have hit is really spot on. And I appreciate CDOT's cooperation and involvement in this partnership. It's been phenomenal. And so that I have no further comments, unless Don, did you need anything more specific from council at this time to help keep going forward?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. I think we've gotten some good feedback and good comments on where we've gone so far, and where some maybe things to focus on as we're further refining the design and taking it forward to the sketch plan for that Planning Commission will see hopefully in May. So I don't think we need anything further, but thank you very much for your time.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of the reality that things like soundproofing are livability, and that's what has been focused on. Things like granite countertops are the things that have been said, no, we don't actually need those. So that's, or kind of accenty exterior things that just had construction costs. So there's definitely the livability side is being focused on. Don't worry. I'm not that, I am cheap, but I'm not that cheap.
Appreciate that. Awesome. Then with that, I think, we always talk about what's the character of this town and what do we pride ourselves on. It's collaborative work like this and going out to bid and finding a team that can quickly identify what Frisco is, and then also bring in a hometown kid to their design team with Andrew Zadeslik on board. So I'm excited about the whole process and looking forward to the next time we're all together. So I appreciate it. Thank you all. With that, I'm bringing up my agenda, excuse me. And if we could take, let's take a quick 5-minute break to allow some technology hiccups to be resolved. So if everybody's good, can we come back around 4:45-ish? And so I know it's early for a quick break, but we'll try something new. So see you guys all in just a minute. For those folks listening in and waiting, so I'm just going to give it a little bit more time. We're struggling with little technology issues with the council member, and I want to make sure that we're all able to hear full presentations on our work session. So bear with me. I apologize, but a few more minutes and we'll get rolling again. Thank you.
Hunter, you out there?
Hey, Dan, it's Deb. You good?
Yeah, I'm back. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he was on just a minute ago.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Dan. Thanks for making it happen.
So Dan, the whole world wants to know, where are you now? Are you in my basement?
Yeah.
You're muted though.
Yeah, when you do these quantum time jumps, warp speed jumps through hyperspace, which I have to do these days. Now I'm back. Had to come in the house, the old RV office. I think I have to wrap it in tinfoil again or something. So something's going on there. Not sure, but thanks, Andy Held, specifically for your comments, re-soundproofing on that CDOT project, which I'm thrilled to see coming out of the ground after working behind it for 30 years. I knew just about everybody and every one of those trailers for decades, and they were good customers. But I'm excited to see the project, and Melissa and Andrew, thank you so much for delivering what up to now appears to be a superlative project. So thank you for your time and effort on this. I know it takes some brain time, so thanks.
Appreciate it, Dan. Yeah, thank you. Just a minute more here and I'll admit to multitasking. I dropped my agenda. We're waiting on Nancy to jump back in.
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Sorry about that. All right. All right. Looks like we got the band back together, so we're ready to move on. I appreciate everybody's patience with that. So we'll move on to work session item number 2, and that's the parking policy discussion. Looking forward to this one as well. And with that, I will welcome Bill Gibson. Bill, good to see you, and the floor is yours. Thank you. Whoops, can't hear you for some reason, Bill. Nope, still not. No. See, we thought we had it all worked out.
I move we all race to chambers in 10 minutes.
Good part is in Frisco, we don't have to race, and it still would only take 10 minutes, Andrew. It's all downhill for you.
Bill, I got your message. Hold on one sec. Let me try.
We're working on tech issues with Bill. I won't use this opportunity to make any cell service jokes, I promise. See, I didn't have to. I got laughs from almost everybody.
We're just going to have Bill log off and log back in and see if that, sometimes it's kind of a reboot.
Yep.
Can you at least hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Bill.
All right. My Zoom says the host has stopped my video, so I'll just talk my way through this. Whenever it comes up.
We'll work on both. Thanks for working through that problem, Bill, and have at it. And if you need a minute, take a minute, but it's all yours.
Am I on there now?
Yeah,
I see myself. All right. Okay. So again, thank you, everyone. We want to talk about the exciting topic of parking, which is pretty broad and vast. So we've narrowed this down to 2 primary topics for you. So we outlined in your staff report kind of at the end, the questions we want to have some discussion about and some feedback from council on. So those main topics are, would council like to modify our existing overnight parking on public streets policy? And then the second one being, would you be interested in modifying our on-site parking requirements for private property? And then as an aside question, would you be interested in initiating a comprehensive parking study or analysis, such as updating our transportation master plan? So that's kind of a side question. Mayor, would you prefer to tackle those one at a time or all at the same time?
Let's go one at a time. I think they feed nicely into each other. So
okay. So we'll start with the overnight parking on public streets. So as hopefully you're all aware, we do not allow overnight parking on the public streets. And that's a year-round policy. It's been in place for decades. We don't know exactly when it was adopted, but it goes back to at least the 1980s for sure. And kind of the underlying premise behind that and goal of that is to facilitate snow plowing and road maintenance. We're in a resort community in the mountains, and as we all know, those are pretty high priority tasks that we need to accomplish. So one of the things we receive comments about over the years from time to time, and it comes up in different discussions with planning commission or council on other topics, is do we want to continue a policy of no street parking year round? We commonly get the question from residents and guests saying, it's 4th of July, there's no snow, what's the problem? So that's essentially what we're looking for feedback from you guys on, is do you see that as a problem having that policy year round or not? It does create some enforcement challenges for us. Obviously, our police department and public works are busy with a lot of tasks, and sometimes a vehicle parked behind somebody's house in a quiet little part of the community doesn't get a lot of attention unless a neighbor raises concerns. So it can lead to some inconsistent enforcement over time, and again, not being a high priority. As with any public policy, there's trade-offs and there's balancing that you have to do with your priority. Parking basically touches on all of your high priority goals. It hits on thriving economy, it hits on inclusive community, sustainability, quality core services, and even vibrant recreation. Parking has impacts on all of those goals that you guys have as a council. So I think I'll just kind of turn it over to you guys and hear your input on, do you think our existing policy is problematic? You want to explore something else or keep the status quo?
Okay, thanks, Bill. Who wants to jump in first? How do folks feels most passionately about 24-hour parking? Melissa, and then Dan.
Well, I would say, I think without Jesse and Rick, they also live in Peak One neighborhood. But I am really concerned about how changing the policy would affect Peak One neighborhood, because the streets are not designed at all for on-street parking, let alone overnight parking. And so I think I would be open to it in certain places, but not I think that's what I would be open to discussing, is some kind of a thoughtful approach as to where it could happen. But you know, and I realize that would be difficult for implementation, but could, you know, as the highest density of locals neighborhood wise in town, in the narrowest streets, it could really create some challenges. And you guys know that we, based on the discussion in the fall, that we have some significant parking issues during certain times of the year in this neighborhood. So that's just some initial feedback.
Thanks, Melissa. Dan.
Yeah, I'm in the camp of no reason to change 24-hour parking, but or the policy the way it exists right now, because it seems to be working fine. I'd like the idea. I've spent many years, you know, coming home after 2 o'clock in the morning. It was always actually nice to see empty streets without cars intermittently spaced up and down. I think from a security standpoint, that's not something we want to invite either. I just don't think you want unattended cars spread along 7-8 blocks. You know, I think it becomes a more difficult security situation. That being said, overnight parking in certain areas easily accessible is very important. We used to have, back in the day, North 7th was allotted to us. This was before late night buses. North 7th was allotted to us as 24-hour parking. So, and that was really important. Having a couple spaces easily accessible, so bartenders can move cars. You know, people know that they can park there, and cars can be aggregated in an area where, from a security standpoint, maybe it's easier to keep an eye on those kind of that situation overnight. So if a patrol car drives by, you know, you can see 3-4 cars parked there. But you know, I think it's important to have areas at each end of Main Street so people can, if they need to, have a place to keep their car overnight, winter and summer, when it's appropriate for public safety. So, but other than that, generally speaking, no, I don't want to invite overnight campers. I don't want to invite people up and down the street, kind of that being, you know, STR overflow parking on Main Street, because, you know, they can only fit 2 cars at their condo and they know they can leave it somewhere on the street. No, I don't think that's where it's at. I think West Main is okay. I've thought for a long time that the West Main parking lot should be redesigned. And I think if we're looking at some kind of a master transportation plan, I think you could probably do a lot better at that lot than it is right now. But I think I'd like to go back to seeing some overnight spots at North 7th, or identify a couple, maybe along 3rd, where that EV charging station is. Or I think there ought to be a couple places where 4 or 5 spots can be assigned for overnight. I think it's to the benefit, but overall, no, I would not want to see all the streets open up.
Thanks, Dan. Andrew, and then Andy.
I'm with the others. No, I don't think we should change the policy, but I do think we should change the reasoning. It's somewhat surprising that over the course of the last 4 decades, we haven't come up with a better reason than snow storage. For the other 6 months of the year, that's not really an answer. So my feeling is staff should come up with, I don't know where this exists within the code, but there should be the whereas clauses updated to reflect our current reality, but not changing the policy. So, you know, we don't want people camping on the streets. We don't want overcrowding of our tight streets, whether it's in, you know, the downtown corridor, Peak One, the Reserve, or Water Dance. You know, that issue exists in every neighborhood. And so, you know, I'm very much thinking that the policy is a good one. The reasoning needs to be updated.
So I'd like to ask if the council would support that kind of reasoning, that having a no overnight parking because tourist-based community, and this could encourage that kind of overnight camping as a policy.
As one of the, to me, that's one of the whereas clauses. It's not, you know, because then we're setting ourselves up for the person who has 5 guests and they're not sleeping in their car, or whoever is. So I think just we need to have a summer reason in addition to our winter reason. I also am totally fine with this being a, you know, a complaint-driven enforcement process. I don't find it inequitable. I don't actually think the police need to drive around and look for people at 3 in the morning or look for cars at 3 in the morning. I think they need to be responsive to the person calling and filing a complaint. And that's the way a lot of our law enforcement works. And I don't have a problem with that being the way we're doing this.
Thanks, Andrew. Andy.
Yeah, thanks. I'm in the same boat as far as don't change. I don't think we need to change what our laws are. It does, I feel, lean more on, you know, do we enforce it and how do we enforce it? And I think Andy just gave a good example of how we would enforce it. I think that's all right. I would, when I'm done, I'd actually like to hear from the chief as far as what he thinks we need in this situation, and what's reasonable and what's not reasonable, and what does he need for enforcement and whatnot, if that's what we're going to do. You know, I do think that for overnight parking, we do have this demographic issue of people who can't afford to live here. And we have a number of local workers who are living in their van. And, you know, to have one spot, even north, you know, by North 10 Mile or something, as essentially a safe haven, I think would be important for some of these people. I mean, I know bartenders who live in their vans because they, you know, they don't necessarily want to have to drive too far and all. But so with that, you know, Chief, what do we need for enforcement? If that's, you know, if we're going to keep things as it is, how do we address overnight?
Well, I think that Andrew hit it on the head. You want us to be proactive or reactive? We have been patrolling the Pequot neighborhood since that first discussion. I like the complaint-driven idea. Or, you know, I look at it as we need our fire hydrants available, snow removal, and emergency vehicles that can get through our streets 24/7. I haven't seen that as an issue. I like the idea of having harder enforcement from November 1st to the end of April. I think that would help us a lot. I keep hearing this thoughtful enforcement. I don't understand what that means. Maybe Melissa can help me with that one. But I think that for the most part, since we've had the change on Main Street with the 3 hours, and we've been working on that quite diligently, although our machine is down right now, that has helped the turnover down there. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Andy. The thought with what Dan mentioned with the parking on 7th, overnight, we had that for years. We had it at 4th and Main, and then we had it down here on the West End. Now, the West End people, that doesn't happen. We've had to summons and move people out of the kayak lot quite a lot this past summer and send them to the Agape Church where they had outhouses, and that their staff supported that, which was a great idea. As I said before, we have lost a lot of revenue from not enforcing parking. However, I like the approach of the council in terms of if they want to complain and it is a violation, we'll ticket.
Chief, while we have you, can I ask you a question? Because every month the report comes out. Is there a difference? I'm looking at it. You had last month 37 parking warnings and 1 parking citation. Is that a function of the amount of time it takes to write a parking ticket versus a warning? Would we have better results if we were actually going full ticket? Like what's going on there?
A lot of that's been on Main Street because like I said, we were going to give a first warning, and those people are receiving warning tickets. If it's a second time, they'll get a violation. However, the problem with parking tickets, unless we hire a collection agency, is if they don't pay them, when they get their driver's license, when they get their driver's license renewed, doesn't even come up. It used to. They had to have all those paid down. Doesn't happen anymore. So where's the teeth? So it's a systemic problem. But I don't know if you guys have had complaints about Main Street. I think we're doing a damn good job of that. Outlying areas. My folks have been patrolling Peak 1 because of that concern. I had an idea for that, but
if I could clarify for you, Chief, as well, what I meant was not thoughtful enforcement, but thoughtful management. So rather than just allowing it across the entire town, as Dan pointed out, we do need some areas that do allow overnight parking. And so let's figure out where we could allow it, especially if we're gonna, moving into the next question, start changing. I'm a big fan of reducing parking requirements, but in order to do so, we need places for people to park overnight. And I think there is a really tangible need for that. So just to clarify your question there.
Thank you. Vail doesn't allow any parking overnight on any street. None of them. Obviously, they have 5-star garages, but we don't have that in this town. If you look at it from another angle, let's just say hypothetically, from April 30th to November 1st, we don't enforce. Unless someone complains, they're parked in front of a fire hydrant, or they're blocking a roadway. I really feel that Jeff and his crew have a heck of a time in the winter if we're not out there moving these cars. So that's important to us. We've had complaints around Frisco and 5th Street where we've written tickets. But again, I think that the Main Street has been taken, I think we've done a pretty good job on that one. And, but when I first got here, people would park off the side streets off of Main Street, and there wasn't a sign in front of them that said, you can't park here from midnight to 6. I said, well, we're gonna have to put these signs in every parking spot? No. But, so I would talk to these folks and try to get compliance. But I think overall, we're doing a pretty good job as a town.
I would agree. And Chief, I would also say that I do think Main Street looks far better, and I think your crew has done a good job. Andy, were you trying to jump in?
No, I just wanted to say thanks to Chief for weighing in there, and you know, it seems that we don't have to change anything, but we should give you know, some space somewhere around the town. So we should identify that.
I think with talking with Bill and Jeff, that we can probably come up with some areas where we can, like Dan said, allow the 24/7 parking. That would help. And like you said, Andy, some people live in their cars. And we educate them about going over to the Agape Church. So it's not an easy answer with parking.
Yeah. Andrew, yeah, and then I'll jump
Just
in. And then
clarification. I think it's a very different conversation. And I agree that we should find places, we should have a 24/7 parking lot for people who can't fit their cars in their driveway, have the extra guest, whatever the excuse is. There's a place that we as neighbors or police can tell them, this is a legal place you can take your car overnight. That's one conversation. It's a different conversation if we're talking about creating an Agape style place where we are allowing people to sleep overnight. I don't have an opinion on it, but I don't think that's the conversation we're having tonight. This is just about cars, not people.
And I would say that Walmart and Safeway allow people to park in their cars and sleep overnight as of this moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with Andrew on that, with separating the two conversations for this sake. Dan, go ahead.
So, general question for you know, maybe Bill. What would be involved with taking a good look at that, you know, that West Main lot, assuming it's CDOT property, so, or however it works? Is there a process we can start to engage them to really kind of look at a better design and have some area there to accommodate that kind of parking? You know, seeing different kinds of that kind of parking all around the country, where while it's, you know, we're overnight stays are not discouraged, but it's very clear that your stay can be for 24 hours. You know, along the lines of that, with the, you know, along Main Street with the overnight, is you can have something, and I'd much rather have a policy that you can fall back on and not necessarily need it all the time, than really wish we had it and you know, or really need it and then don't have it. So I'd like to explore a little bit more in terms of West Main, that West Main parking lot, about, you know, maybe exploring some new capacity and new design to see what we can do to accommodate that. I mean, that's, I think, Chief, you alluded to this. My observation is that functionally how it's used right now, I see the same campers in there 3-4 nights in a row, a week in a row, 2 weeks in a row. And, you know, having some signage and having a policy to help move them along is fine. Discouraging along that way goes a long way, I think. But Bill, if or Nancy, if there's something we can do to look at that end, I would be curious to see what we could come up with down there.
Yeah, coincidentally, Councilmember Fallon, that topic came up earlier this year internally among staff. I believe the Recreation and Culture Department was starting to look at maybe some opportunities for GOCO grants this summer, and it was looking at that West Main parking lot as a possibility. So Susan Lee on our team and Diane McBride and some other folks are already kind of looking into that. I've been talking with CDOT, and so has Jeff Goble and Addison Canino from Public Works. We are in the process of updating our lease agreement with CDOT for that lap. We did discover that has technically expired, and they are more than welcome to renew that lease. They are open to conversation about changing that parking lot, potentially making improvements or increasing capacity, those types of things. Obviously, being part of a Federal Highway Commission interstate, there's some layers to go through to get there at the end of the day. But it sounds like they're open to that conversation. And Chief can maybe clarify, but I believe we do allow overnight parking in that lot today. No camping, no trailers, some other provisions, but that is a place where people can park. I think there's some opportunities at the marina at certain times of the year And then also our 275 Granite property, commonly known as Sabatini lot. I believe we have allowed some overnight parking there at times as well. But we can certainly talk more internally with Public Works and PD and our department and come up with a strategy or maybe some more strategic places to allow some spots to be used.
I think that kind of sounds like the gist and the direction I'm hearing from council. I think I just say I'm I'm the odd man out. I think it's ridiculous to not allow 24-hour parking in the summertime. I see the benefit in the winter, certainly. I've always thought it to be a very odd rule for all the complaints that we have gotten over the years, and from what Bill kind of suggested. And I think something Melissa touched on is the direction I was, I'd prefer to see this go, but I think if there's enough council support, I'm definitely behind that. But, my own house in my own neighborhood, we were the beneficiaries of a warning because we've parked in our front yard when it's nice out since we've owned this house, but it is town right away. And so we got our warning, as did every one of our neighbors. And it was an interesting morning, I can tell you, when everybody came to my house to say, we've parked here for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and now we can't park in front of our own house, even though they knew it was town right away, as was also called out in the staff report. There are some interesting issues, but in certain neighborhoods, I think throughout our community, we can have that type of parking that doesn't have the unfortunate effect like it does in Peak One and certain other areas. Because I think there are some streets where the town right of way is a blurry spot with people's parking pad or otherwise. And I would have supported looking at those options, but if that's too complicated or not the direction of council, I'm supporting that. Just want to be heard there. And I do think possibly a follow-up conversation to what Dan was saying is looking at options that we can do for possibly inhabited 24-hour parking. I'd support that down the road, and we can revisit that conversation definitely. I'm never a fan of having laws that aren't regularly enforced. I think it creates a gray area, but I also support the chief's idea of strict enforcement from November 1 to April, sometime when the snow stops falling, and then lead towards the complaint-driven enforcement in the rest of parts of the year. I'm sure Thad cringes a little bit at that, but I think it seems like a good balance to achieve goals for everybody. Other thoughts before we move on to the next question? Dan, go ahead.
I don't know how complicated this gets, but it certainly doesn't seem unreasonable to explore a mechanism to allow people to utilize that right of way in certain areas of town. And we have different zoning districts. We can maybe have different parking zoning districts. Again, not to overly complicate it, but we see the same problem along Creekside and Miners Creek. And it doesn't seem unreasonable to have people in those situations to be able to register their car, get a pass, be in that spot, understand the rules. And if they don't understand or can't follow them, then they lose that privilege, because in that case it would be. So I don't know, what we run into, but again, it's one of the situations that maybe doesn't have to be so binary, that we just have to figure out a way in those areas where it's been a common practice, and all we have to do is figure out a way statutorily to facilitate that.
Mayor and Council, if I could weigh in on a couple of these comments. First, what I'm hearing you say is you don't want to change the overnight parking regulations per se, but we do want to provide overnight parking.
Correct. A few certain areas, specific called out sections through town.
But we're not going to really enforce the no overnight, no right-of-way parking at certain times. So how is somebody who's going to move into a home know when the law is enforced and when it isn't?
It's not enforced.
It's not enforced.
No. The way I'm hearing it is the police will proactively enforce it during the winter, and it's complaint driven, as are so many of our other nuisance type crimes. So it's not. I don't like the term. It's not being enforced. It's complaint. It's enforced through complaints.
It's proactively driven, not really in the snow removal time. We really, it's also complaint driven. Our Public Works Department calls and asks for assistance essentially, and they can't park there because there's a lot of snow. But in the times that it's not snow conditions, we're going to tell someone that we're only going to enforce if somebody calls to complain, so you can call your neighbor. It just doesn't seem like a good policy that we're going to give direction to the department to say, if a neighbor calls and complains, I don't like that guy's parking in my right of way, it annoys me, we'll write him a ticket, but down the street we're not. That's just.
Nancy, how do you do it with noise? If you got a loud hot tub next to me and I call it in, but then there's a loud hot tub down the street and nobody calls that in,
Right.
The loud hot tub down the street doesn't get a ticket.
That's applied consistently. So throughout town, if somebody is violating the noise ordinance and it bothers a neighbor, or the police happen to hear it for some other reason, that is a consistent application of that law. It's at all times enforced, but we find out about it when somebody calls and complains. Speeding limits are at all times enforced, but we only cite it when we see it. Somebody calls, they complain. That's consistent. Here, this is comments by the police chief say, we are not going to take the same action. And I'm trying to understand why that is, not from the police perspective, but from why council supports that, so that we can say this law is not a priority and we're not going to enforce it the same way during different times of the year. So that we understand that, and it's in the legislative notes, because when somebody complains or they appeal their ticket, I'm being treated differently, you're discriminating against me, you're choosing me because my neighbor doesn't like me, I'm a different type of person, then that's the argument they'll make. You're picking on me because there's no other reason that I got this citation. So there must be some policy reason, and that's what I'm trying to get you to come at, that you're saying, well, it's really, during the summer, we don't need that space for snow removal. So why not allow that, but not have overnight parking?
And I'm sorry to monopolize, but that's where I started, is we need the reasoning for the summer rule, which we have. And then it becomes, I mean, that's stage one. Are we good there? Meaning for the following reasons, we have this ban in place 12 months of the year.
And which is what I'm hearing. We don't want overnight parking in the public right of way because we want to make sure that people are not camping there.
Not camping, clogging the streets,
What about permit?
overcrowding. Remember, two-thirds of our houses are not occupied by full-time residents.
So Councilmember Fallon brought up permit parking. That's also another option, that they're not
Sure.
camping, but they're staying there. It's a little bit of an administrative hassle, but trying to get at, if we're really trying to make sure that we prevent camping or overnight camping, then we'd want to, well, some residents use it as overnight camping too. I've heard that, but is there an interest in any permit parking? It's a process, and it could be a cost. It could be a cost that people have to get a permit. It costs them $100 or what have you.
I'd like to, Andy Hell's been trying to get in, then I'll see.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everybody. I think a few things have been identified here. As Dan was saying, or as Hunter was saying, there are a few areas in town that we could, section out that way and allow people to park. We could. I don't see why that wouldn't be an issue. Just complaint driven, I feel like ends up giving a big voice to just a few people who end up complaining, all the time. So that's a tough one, because then it ends up, we've only got a few areas that you can't park in because that guy always complains. Is that fair because it's not down the street too? I don't know. I don't really think so. I agreed in that Creekside Drive and/or Miners Creek or some of these on this side of town aren't affected like they are in Peak One.
Mm-hmm.
Peak One was designed to be, operated with less cars in it And, these other streets haven't been, and we do have a lot of right of way. And, so this is a tough one. But I think, looking at all of these options, it could even be that businesses get, permits for employees that end up parking in that area or something. These are, this is tough, but I think there's bits of everything that we could apply to our situation, and then it wouldn't be blanket no overnight parking everywhere, because we'd have our few sections, we'd have our one lot that you're allowed to camp in, we'd have how we're going to deal with who parks on the streets in peak one, right? This is the overall thing. Melissa, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you made me think of something, Andy, and that is, what if we were to have a policy that could capture little places like in front of Hunter's house? That's kind of a unique situation. I mean, not to pick on you, Hunter, but there's probably a dozen like that just makes sense for people to use. And so if we were to craft a very simple policy that people could apply to park on the street in front of their house, but didn't open that up for they would have, it would say permit only, et cetera. So that it didn't open up like a whole can of worms. But I think at the end of the day, we should be reasonable. And for those people like Hunter and his family, it just makes sense. It's not causing any disruption. But in my neighborhood, if my neighbor decided to park in front of my house 24/7, it would cause a great deal of disruption. So I'd love us to explore that further. I don't have an answer tonight, but maybe a policy crafted to capture some of those one-offs.
That's Councilmember Sherman. That's a great idea. We could definitely explore that. A permit process could be initiated through code amendment, where if they have this X amount of space that accommodates a vehicle that doesn't encroach into the driving location and so on, they could apply, receive a permit temporary, because the town can always want to reserve the right to take back its right of way. But I could definitely include that in our code amendments, which would then address those. There are a lot of unique situations like that where people really do have space in front to park, or they need extra parking and that's available right there. So they're doing it anyway. And if we're not, or we're selectively enforcing based on complaints, that would avoid the discriminatory issue that I'm concerned about.
And I think I kind of agree with where Melissa and what Andy said is, I think it's a little more, I don't think we can blanket the town with one parking policy, but looking at what we've had, it's been no parking, no overnight parking throughout town for now, however many decades we've decided, but it's never been a problem in a majority of places. Like it's, people always thought that, say, my neighborhood, since Melissa's, since it's I think a good example is because of the feel of the street I live on, no one who's visiting here ever just says, I'm going to park in front of this house and go down to Main Street and, do whatever I'm going to do and leave my car overnight, because it doesn't have that feel. But yet 2 blocks closer, if they're at Main Street, they don't leave their car overnight because the signs say no overnight parking, and it's abided by and has been well over the years. And I think there are certain neighborhoods where the character of the neighborhood or area of town, it doesn't necessarily have to be a neighborhood, just limit people wanting to overnight park there because it doesn't seem appropriate. And other places where we could say this is a no 24-hour parking zone because it doesn't have the room, like in Peak One neighborhood, or go here if you work a shift that keeps you past 2 a.m. on Main Street, we have dedicated parking for you. If you plan to drink tonight, please park here so you can leave your car overnight and you're not getting on the road after too many at one of our local establishments. And it's clear. And I think we can find a balance there that doesn't blanket the entire town with one specific parking ordinance. And I know that will cost time, but yeah. And I don't even think we need permitting, because I think a lot of the issues aren't us. I think homeowners and residents, we know where we can park, we know how to park, and most of the time we can walk, ride our bikes, or otherwise do what we need to do. And we're not the 24-hour parking issues. So I would look at maybe I think it was Andy Held who said, almost like parking zoning map for the town, and we can kind of look at where it makes sense and where it doesn't.
Well, that would be helpful because that's a consistent application of the policy. Because people have lived here for so long, there's a lot of people who know parking isn't, sorry, Councilmember Aronson, it's not enforced. And I've been told that many, many, many times, not enforced. So that's why Main Street was allowed to be, people stayed on it and the employees parked it because it wasn't enforced. So we changed that and enforced it, and now they're following the code. So we need to have a consistent policy in the town, which ensures that people have the opportunities similarly situated.
Dan and then Andrew.
So, Hunter, to follow up on that a little bit, I would say in general, of course, that's exactly what I was talking about, is this whole idea that where it's happening, just codify it. It's working, it's fine, everybody gets it. However, we worked really hard to develop some of these regulations for short-term rentals. And I think you do have to make a distinction between allowing that capacity for short-term rentals if we're concerned about occupancy there in those neighborhoods, to make sure that people who are coming in just don't see cars parked there and line up their 2 extra cars in that right of way, because that really is antithetical to what we're trying to do in terms of occupancy and short-term rentals. So it does, I think, beg the idea of some kind of recognition of a permit process. I don't know what it would look like, but the idea is that, yeah, I'm a long-term resident, I live here, the right of way in this area is accessible to me, I have a sticker on my car, I'm okay. If there's a complaint, or if the town, if for whatever reason that right of way is needed, for whatever reason, in every capacity by the town, an agency of the town, or some other complaint comes up and it's obvious that a car is there that should not be, you have that enforcement option. And that's, so you can do both.
And I don't disagree with that, Dan. I appreciate that. I think that is a good direction. Andrew.
Yeah, on the enforcement, I mean, I believe in enforcing the rules. I thought this was just a conversation accommodating the reality of the police staffing and ticketing issues. So, my preference is enforce it. To Dan's point, which I was going to make as well, which is we just instituted major parking regulations on short-term rentals. Now, if you're talking about saying, well, if you got room in front of your house, and Hunter, I don't know if you have a short-term renter next to you, the space, these are public streets. So
be excluded, just period.
I'm sorry?
Short-term rentals have a whole different section in the code and can be excluded from they have a specific parking requirement. There's a reason for it, that they can be excluded from. This house has a short-term rental permit. It's excluded even if this entire street has a different parking zone. That's easy.
Okay, then only a full-time resident is eligible for a parking permit. I like the cleanliness of our streets. So, I respect that they're public streets. It doesn't bother me when my neighbor has a party and they park in front of my house. That's what public means. But I'm not seeing the need to encourage lots of our residents even to have to have 2 or 3 or however many extra parking spaces in front of their houses.
I think we got good direction here that says we're going to look at some areas that might be open to either a zone or a permit type area. I would say it's more the house, not the person. So if the house has an STR license, it's excluded. We know Peak 1 is excluded. We know most areas excluded. So we're really looking at, are there exceptions to our exclusion of no overnight parking in front of your home? There may be a few exceptions is what I've heard. And we'll look at that as a potential and potentially bring that back for council consideration as either a permit or maybe a zone area, but STR is excluded. That's what I hear.
For the first time, I want to be clear that that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't know if others are, but I'm not looking for a mass rezoning or re-regulating all of our 24-hour parking. But if others are, that's the way the system works.
I didn't hear that. Not a mass, but just some exceptions potentially.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. do people feel with the direction that Nancy just kind of reiterated? Are people good with that? Is that their take on? Dan said yes.
Well, let me clarify, because I think that's important, is we're not changing the rule, but we're adding exceptions to the rule, not the other way around.
Potentially,
that's what I heard.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. Potentially.
So peak one won't be the exception. Peak one is still the rule,
That's correct.
but there'll be exceptions to the rule.
Right. That's what
Yep.
I heard. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Andy, are you comfortable? So we're not changing anything now, and we potentially look at adding in a few exception areas.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think permitting gets us what we're looking for in a lot of those areas, especially for long-term. Also helps support the long-term population more so.
Andrew, you comfortable enough? I know it's not exactly what you said, but it's for the most part.
And I reserve the right to like the idea when it comes back. But at this point, that's not where my head is on. It seems a little bit of a broad brush, massive change. But
And
again, I may love it when it comes back. So let's see what happens.
And I think also, Nancy, looking at potentially a few more spots that could be 24-hour spots sprinkled through closer to the core district.
We did hear that, I'm sure. I don't know if Bill has other clarifications he wants.
I think that gives me direction.
All right. So are we ready for the on-site parking requirements in the code conversation? Number 2 on the staff question. So Bill, I'll let you give some background on that and we'll jump back in.
Yeah, I won't dive into too many details and bore you with the long history since 1983 of the 15 different code changes. But the topic of do we require too much or not enough parking does seem to kind of pop up in different conversations, whether it's affordable housing or sustainability or a variety of things. So that's partly why we've got it on the agenda for you. And that's why we included in your packet a copy of the actual regulations. So that you guys could see what we have on the books today rather than try to speculate. Kind of the general overview. Generally speaking, for residential properties, we require 1 parking space per bedroom, capped at 4. So that means if you had a 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom house, your parking requirement's 4. For the most part, the market takes care of those situations. Most 5, 6-bedroom houses probably have a 2-car garage and 2 spaces in the driveway. So not too much of an issue. There are some exceptions to that cap of 4. There is an incentive for deed restricted employee housing, workforce housing. The cap is 2 rather than 4. So studios and 1-bedrooms need 1 parking space, 2-bedroom needs 2. 3 or more bedrooms is still capped at 2. So it does help from the perspective of development costs, and things like that. The other side of that coin, again, with every public policy, there's intended and unintended consequences, and you're balancing your priorities. There can also probably be some arguments made about livability and inclusiveness of different types of households, and different needs that families have for use of personal vehicles in different working situations. So that's kind of the other side of the coin with the affordable housing concept of creating a parking reduction. We also include in the historic overlay district the opportunity to reduce parking for residential. I'm not aware of any places where that's been taken advantage of, but it is in the code. For commercial parking, it's more a ratio of the square footage of the business. So the larger the business, the more parking that's required. And those are basically set up in categories. So you have just general retail as a certain ratio, restaurants have a different ratio. Medical offices, it's all similar. That applies town-wide with the exception of Main Street. So both East Main and West Main, both are exempted from those parking requirements for commercial uses. So any new restaurant on Main Street has no parking requirement. Any new retail store, any new personal service on Main Street has no parking requirement. The only time we require parking for commercial uses is first floor office. There's another provision in the code that allows for on-street parking credits in those same areas. So if you had a property on Main Street that you own and you wanted to create some office space, you would, per the code, have some credits for the width of your lot adjacent to public parking on the street. So if you had a 75-foot wide lot, you'd have 3 parking credits to apply to your property, which could get you an office space or 2. So in effect, on Main Street East and West, we really don't have much of a parking requirement at all for any commercial uses. And that's got incentives to keep our commercial core vibrant and those types of things. And obviously the town has created these public parking areas, unlike our residential districts where we have, for the most part, large gravel shoulders, and that's it. We do have formalized parking. We meet ADA requirements and a variety of things in our Main Street core. We also have some other exceptions and provisions in the code related to mixed use. That one comes up from time to time. So that incentivizes shared parking between different types of uses. So if you've got an office use and a residential component on the same property, in theory, those may operate at different times of the day and hit their peak demands at different times of the day. So there can be some reductions in parking. It does require an engineer's analysis and some technical expertise behind verifying why that is the case. And so it's not a blanket improvement, but it is an opportunity for folks. We also recently, with the land use code adoptions, included some EV charging station incentives in there as well. So you can get some parking reductions for including EV stations. So that's just kind of a broad overview of where the parking requirements are at this time. So we're curious for council feedback on how you see on-site parking requirements today.
Thanks, Bill. Melissa, I really want to throw it to you or Andy Held with your past experience. And I know, Melissa, you already mentioned it once, so you get kicking this off.
Sure, I feel like I'm going first a lot, but I'm happy to. I get excited about this because somehow this has become a drum that I've become. So I beat this drum frequently, and I'm a big believer in it. And when I first, and that is reduction of parking requirements. And when I first learned of it was years ago, hearing a presentation from the former planning director, Julianne Woods of Snowmass Village, and they had reduced their at the time, this was about 5 or 6 years ago, they had reduced their parking requirement to 0.5 spaces per bedroom. So essentially cutting ours in half. And Snowmass Village, as you guys I'm sure know, is very dense, very, very expensive. Land is extremely limited. It's topographically challenged. And so there really is no place to put parking lots. I mean, it for all those reasons, it makes a whole lot of sense. So in my professional life, I've tried to push it where I can. Here, I like to try and promote it, but I don't have a solution except that I have this wonderful book that I would like to recommend called Shared Parking, and it's put out by ULI. And I wanted to read one thing in here. I mean, the whole thing is just amazing. But it says the most anti-sustainable approach of all is not to consider shared parking. And so the number one thing that drives the affordability of development is parking. We are designing developments around parking, and you just saw it tonight with studio architecture. And I think all of you have seen it on many levels with any development that comes forward. And so I think what I would love to do is take a really strategic approach to this. I think that there's a whole body of work that I would encourage Bill and planning staff and Public Works to really understand before we start crafting policy. I think it's not something that our town council can necessarily get our arms around without a lot of sort of empirical data to say, okay, this works and this is how it works. And so Snowmass Village, while I love to bring up that example, has it worked? What have been the challenges? And I want to know more about it. I'm by no means an expert on this. All I know is that in such a place like Frisco, where our land area is so very limited, I would love to see the automobile take a backseat to affordability, housing, sustainability, and design. So I'm really happy we're talking about this, and I think it's just the first step, and I'd love to see that the policies start being explored for us to consider.
Thanks, Melissa. I think we just got assigned homework. I think that's Andy, go ahead.
That was very eloquently said. Thank you very much, Melissa. How do I follow that? It's all in there except, part of the similar idea of, we designed Peak One to be, to use less cars and everything else, but everybody keeps moving in with multiple cars, so I mean, we can build what we want the future to be, which is good, because that's what the future is going to be, but that's not incentive for people to get rid of their cars necessarily, right? That's a tough one. I don't know that it's got to be changed right now. That's really almost more like, Bill, does that have to be changed? Do you see that in order to be able to fit in? What does the rest of staff think with that? I know you're bringing it to us because, the future shows that we're going to go smaller, or we should. And I'm in favor. I'm in favor for that, but I agree with Melissa in that this is a much broader conversation than we're going to come up with like all the solutions right at this moment. But I also want to be solution based as far as, what our next steps are and whatnot. So, that's, I'm going to leave it there because I don't have an answer.
And just to be clear, we're not asking council to give us a specific code amendment to adopt at this time, changing it from, 1 per 350 square feet to 1 per 400 square feet or something that's precise. We're just looking for general direction of, is this something you want us to take on and add to our work plan, and some general policy direction if you have it.
Okay. Thanks, Bill. Go ahead, Dan.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Melissa, for sharing that. And it's not just the shared parking. The shared car business model is starting to proliferate in urban areas. So when we look at this kind of dichotomy here in Frisco that we just talked about, and overnight parking, that urban core and that kind of rural outlying area, I think it really does beg this more creative solution. And this really segues into this conversation about Granite Street. And to me, it just any day would trade living space for auto space. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have the autos, but we'll drive the opportunity for the shared car business model, for that public transportation business model that in our master transportation plan, it's right around the corner if we create the need for it. So I think when we're looking at Granite Street, and to me, there's no reason why when you're looking at the CDOT lot, or you're looking at the Sabatini lot, or looking at, tying that workforce housing that could be part of anything that still develops along Granite to some on-street parking along Granite, where it's just on the opposite side of the core. I think it's reasonable to kind of look at a policy that allows for that. So absolutely on board for being creative in those zones, linking that workforce housing to that kind of parking. I think that idea of that 0.5 that's tied to workforce housing, I think is a great idea. And we have the space to do that along Granite with these maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 new developments that are going to be coming on board there. So if we can trade that space for living space, it's a win for us. And Melissa, I can't wait to get into that and take a little bit of look at it. And maybe there's a graphic novel version of that would be good for somebody like me. But I think, Bill, to move in that direction along Granite and see where that can be tied, where we're not gobbling up existing parking that's already been created, and whether or not it's required in certain areas, that parking is certainly tied to existing uses. along Granite, we have some real opportunities there and a great opportunity to explore some of these new ideas.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with the first three and looking at what others are doing and what we can do to be creative and not, as Melissa said, not design around an automobile, but the person in the house and the family would be a good direction. Andrew.
Yeah, my ultimate thought is I don't know enough to have an opinion on this. You know, if we were to propose a half a space per unit, I'm not sure if the developers would hug me stronger than the environmentalists because they get more density, but we have fewer cars. But then anybody who lives anywhere near that property probably would hate us because the people are going to have cars until something shifts in the market and the industry of the world we live in, because we're still Frisco. We're not New York City. So fundamentally, I got to learn a lot more before I have an opinion of, is this a good idea or a bad idea? But I think it's fraught with controversy. So bring more data, you know, continue the conversation, but let's not do anything rash.
I think that's, I think that was a good summary of most of our thoughts. Is that you guys good kind of hearing more at another time and looking into it. And I think definitely I'm going to explore more of what Melissa was looking at. Don, please.
I was also going to ask the question too of council. I guess there's a couple of approaches we can take this. We can look at small strategic changes, or we can look at a more comprehensive analysis. If you take a look at our transportation master plan, you'll note that the date on that document is 1986. So just to put that in perspective, in 1986, there was no Walmart, there was no marina, there was no mountainside, let alone P1 neighborhood. There was no water dance, no reserve. The post office was still on Granite Street, not next to Town Hall. So that kind of helps frame the age of that document. We have done some, kind of piecemeal master planning related to parking and transportation since then in the community plan. So like our 2019 community plan looked mostly at parking, but mostly in the core area. So there's some analysis there, but it wasn't a comprehensive reclassification of our street system or a reanalysis of where we have stop signs and not have stop signs, those types of things. We're also kind of looking at parking even in our recreation areas. I believe the Marina Master Plan is taking a, kind of a marina focused analysis of trying to solve some traffic and parking issues we have there. And so that'll probably be coming up here in the next few months. We're looking at doing some things on Granite Street to make that a whole street at the end of the day. But again, these are kind of a little more piecemeal approach versus a comprehensive transportation plan. And obviously, when you take the comprehensive approach, there's cost and time associated with that. You have to bring in experts in those fields of transit and transportation, public input, all those types of things. But it may yield a better result for you at the end of the day, and you can be a little more strategic with some of your other decisions. So we're looking for a little feedback from council too, if you want us to at least explore those options. And obviously we would have to come back to you with the numbers from the budget and timeframes and those types of things, if that's something you would like to explore.
Thanks, Bill. I agree with that. And I know Don wanted to weigh in, but there's also no sidewalks, and I was 8-year-old when that transportation plan was made, I guess. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one thing I wanted to add is there was a reason that we thought it would be a good idea to have the CDOT project, the 619 Granite housing project, and this parking discussion on at the same time. As you heard from Studio Architecture, that was a big challenge as they were going through their design process. How do we balance the number of units with the parking regulations, and as well as the parking needs of the future tenants and residents of that development? We at one point in time were exploring as staff the opportunities to do, could we consider a code amendment for X in order to accommodate this particular project, as well as potential other future projects. Ultimately, what we determined is our best path forward right now at this point in time would be to go ahead and especially considering the desires for livability and the need for vehicles for CDOT's tenants of that project, as they were our partner on this, that we really decided that we should just pursue designing a project that could meet our code. But again, as all of you have pointed out, the code requirements are a big challenge for our workforce housing. It is something that as transportation evolves, as we get better transit, there may be additional opportunities, and we as staff will certainly continue to take a look at potential ideas for these.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing, Bill, that the transportation plan is that old. And to me, it's a no-brainer that we need to update that. And if we're considering a reduction of parking requirements or shared parking requirements, we absolutely, as Andy pointed out, we can't just cram down parking and not have other ways for people to get around. It just doesn't work. And so in order to encourage more sustainable solutions, we need to look to the future. So I would be very supportive of us taking on a transportation planning effort.
Thanks, Melissa. I would agree. I think I want to. I also think something Dan said is kind of worrying me a little bit, that we're about to embark on a really important project with CDOT, and if we could get more units and find a way, especially with that end of Granite Street completely changing this summer with the way traffic flows on it, I don't want to miss an opportunity to potentially get more units in a development because of a parking code that is so restrictive, where we do have, we could offer resident parking permits and give them spots to park overnight on 7th or on Granite and allow that in those few spots. And if that benefits us 2 more units or gets us a little more density to get, units with balconies on that 3rd floor, as Melissa and Andy pointed out, I think some things I feel there is maybe a little bit of a time crunch on looking at, and other things like doing a full comprehensive plan to meet a bigger picture goal. And we can see how much better we've implemented a lot of things recently because we've had comprehensive plans and not the one-offs like Bill kind of mentioned this. So I know I'm proposing both, but I think we have an opportunity in front of us with the CDOT lot and that development, plus doing a comprehensive plan.
Well, Mayor and Council, could I have Don or Bill weigh in on what the process would be to grant an exception to the project? You don't have to have a code amendment for everything. There are exceptions. What's the process that the CDOT project could request one? Bill or Don?
I would say, generally speaking, you're most likely looking at a code change.
Yeah.
We do have a variance process in our code. However, there's a very high bar to get over with that process. One of those being you have to demonstrate no other viable use of the property without the variance. So with new construction, it's very, very difficult to get through that. I can check in the code and see if we have an administrative adjustment process. On the Mary Ruth project, which was a town housing project, we did reduce the parking requirement, I want to say, for 2 of those units. And that was accommodated through the historic overlay incentive, since we did preserve the historic Mary Ruth building and house itself as part of that. But I can certainly flip through the code here real quick and check out the administrative adjustment section as well for you.
And Bill and I, we did do this exercise earlier, and there wasn't anything specific in the code that would allow for an exception. Bill did note in the staff report that there are a couple of exceptions in existence. There's parking in the right of way at, for example, the Frisco Lodge off of 3rd Avenue there on the north side. So there are a couple of places where there is overnight parking in the right of way dedicated for a specific purpose. How that came about, and that's a whole lot of research that we haven't done yet. There most likely it would be a code amendment, as Bill mentioned, though, and certainly that would be a couple-month process to go through drafting it, getting it through Planning Commission, and then ordinances before Town Council.
So sounds like continued conversation. And Bill, did you hear enough on kind of looking at you know, what other communities are doing and creative possibilities that finds a balance of the realities of, we all still kind of need our cars, but we want to start pushing towards making them not the focus of development. Is that a fair summary?
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the challenge with every community's parking code is you've got sustainability goals, you have, affordability goals, design goals you want to achieve, but you're also balancing those with livability and inclusiveness and things like that as well. So it's finding a balance amongst all those high priority goals you guys have.
Andy, jump in.
I do support updating the transportation plan.
Great. Thank you. I saw head nods there. And finally, Bill, what was your third? I can jump back to the.
It was the question about if you want to pursue an update to that transportation master plan or some other higher level analysis like that. And I think I'm hearing direction that you're open to that. So like I said, that's something we'll look into more and come back with more specific ideas of timeframes and costs.
Can you just thumbnail what is it? What would that tell us? What would it identify?
It depends on what kind of scope we would want to set out. I've seen communities. I was involved when Vail did their transportation master plan update. So there's a lot of engineering data that goes into that, calculating number of vehicle trips, for example, all the way down to what color light bulb they wanted for the streets. Did they want to stick with they wanted to go LED for environmental and energy efficiency purposes, but a lot of the LEDs at the time they were doing it had more of the blue hue to it and tone, which wasn't fitting with the community character of the more traditional incandescent yellow light that you see in a resort area in a ski town. So it can get down to that minutia, but again, it goes typically all the way up to how you designate your streets as arterials or collectors and side streets and things like that, and what kind of general policies you look at for parking, where you put your traffic control devices and why. And usually it's forward looking. Frisco for the most part is built out, but if you look at that 1986 transportation plan, it envisioned Lusher Court connecting to West Main Street along the interstate, almost like a frontage road at the time, which obviously is something that didn't come to fruition. But those long-term vision and plans get implemented into that type of thing as well. It also looks at transit and where your transit stops work most effectively, or future opportunities and things like that. And I think there's been conversation too. We've got some challenges and opportunities with our other facilities, including the marina and the PRA, and how do we tie our recreation components into Main Street and some of our businesses. And I've heard comments from council and planning commissioners about concerns and challenges at some of the intersections on Summit Boulevard, like the middle school intersection. And how do we make improvements to things like that? And what are opportunities for pedestrian flow? So a master transportation plan could get into all of those types of issues. Or you can limit the scope to something smaller.
Is that, you good with that, Andrew? Good. And I think Andy.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that because, I would like to answer all those questions of all those outlying areas and how we're supposed to flow. And that's a good thing. One thing I would just like to add about to the earlier part of the conversation, with the end of Main Street parking, we should also put consideration in there for skier parking for people skiing at Copper and parking for more than 3 hours in that area, and even potentially promoting that as jump on the bus for a one-stop ride and then come back and spend money in town. But skier parking is a thing, people do it and they're parking for longer than 3 hours, and I think we need them. Thanks.
Councilmember Held, we specifically limit the parking to prevent skiers from parking. That has been a strategy for a long, long time because they took up commercial parking on Main Street.
But not on the west end, not in the west end.
Not on the west end, no.
Right, the west end is what I'm talking about, but it's also that it's like, well, then let's enforce it because people are doing it in droves. That, that's just the way it is.
Main Street parking, you think they're still parking there longer than 3 hours for skiing?
Yeah, you'll see them out there, putting their boots in the trunk and taking their stuff out, getting ready to go to jump on the bus. They do it. They park in front of the professional building. They park, down at the end. I think we can't avoid them, right? Because Copper with their parking challenges and everything else, and the bus, it's just something we should end up working with. That's where I lie there.
So seems fair. Thanks, Andy. Bill, anything else? Clarification from us? You feeling good about what you got this evening?
I am, unless Don or Nancy have any other questions or comments they have.
Nope. All right, great. Thank you guys. Appreciate that, and good look at something that hasn't been looked at for a while, obviously. How about we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll keep plugging away. Sound good? See you guys in a little bit.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill.
You have tally.
Hi, Bonnie. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How are those little puppies of yours doing?
They're quiet at the moment, but don't expect that to last.
That's good.
How's
And
your
they're
pup?
not little.
Probably not little anymore either. Yeah.
No, they're not.
Giant.
Second longer here. Just wait for Melissa to get back and we'll jump into budget. Oh, she's back. Awesome. Great. Then moving on in the work session agenda to item number 3, and this is the discussion for the 2021 budget amendments. And I will turn it over to Nancy. Bonnie, kicking us off. Nancy, thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, this budget discussion is brought to you mid-year, something different than we've done before. And we're doing that because, as you know, we adopted a very conservative budget for 2021. Going into the year, we were not sure back in September how well our crystal ball was working. And by October, it was a little bit not clear. So we decided that we were going to bring it back and address some of the items that we had deferred. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and go a little bit easier if that's okay with you guys. But I won't do it for too long because I know it can be kind of annoying. So this is the budget report that I'm confident you've all been through, and I've also spoken to all of the council. Want to just take a few moments to talk a little bit about our net fund balances. We have no decisions to make here, but we wanted to point out that we have a solid financial footing here as a result of specific strategies that together we initiated in 2020. We deferred capital projects of 4.7 million. We didn't transfer almost $1 million from the general fund to the capital fund. We held on to that. We designated our economic stability fund, about 7 million in the general fund, and we significantly worked hard at reducing expenditures. We also have received almost $1 million in grant funding. So you'll notice in our net fund balance that this is what's left over in the general fund. We had budgeted about 7 million. We're actually at the end of the year at 17 million, so a variance of 9.8. These other funds, other than the capital fund, are restricted funds. We don't spend a lot of time talking about those. It's always good to have additional revenue in those funds. And we point out in the report that it is due to strategic thinking, conservative planning, and really careful budgeting, along with holding on to our expenses and reducing anything we had to expend, we were able to come in so much better than we had projected. You'll note here in Exhibit 1, just so make that a little bit bigger, that our reduction in expenses on the general fund were just over 15% in the year. That's a significant reduction in spending. You'll note that the capital is down by about 71% in spending. Don't get confused by that. That's because we transferred the money and we held on to it. We chose not to spend those funds. So overall, this is a significant improvement. We also surprisingly saw an overall 3.5% increase in revenue. And that was due to the economy not collapsing in the way that some of us might have anticipated. So this is our net fund balance. We're in good financial position. The town is well positioned to now take those funds and invest in the strategic plans and vision of the council. So what is before you today is a couple of questions we have, and this is on a work session. We intend to bring back an amended ordinance based on your discussion tonight in 2 meetings. So first is the capital projects. So back in this, when we prepared the budget, we reduced capital projects significantly, and you'll see that here on Exhibit 2. So I'm not going to read them all, but these were what we had planned in our capital projects for 2021. But this middle column is what we deferred. So what are we recommending as an adjustment? Very little, and there's a specific reason for that. We're already at the end of March. We are not able to suddenly start doing new construction projects we hadn't yet planned. So for the most part, if it's a construction project, something we didn't need to purchase, there's no reason to have to bring that back. But we are recommending increasing our asphalt replacement budget by $50,000, our storm system repair budget by $50,000, recommending we reduce and just eliminate this town hall atrium design by $15,000. We're not moving forward on that. So I'll make some comments about that. And then significantly, the request and recommendation is to fund the playground improvements or park management plan that you've already approved to finish the Walter Byron Park. The council has given previous direction. You really want to finish that park. You're now going to be finishing the Meadow Creek Park. So we're recommending going and putting those funds back into the parks plan. So overall, and the capital projects, it's about $450,000. However, we're also suggesting that we go ahead and put $150,000 into the capital project for our GAP project, our capital improvement fund for our GAP project, because we know that we're going to need to be finishing some significant design work on how we're going to do the landscaping. There's really good opportunities for art and public spaces out there, design work, some infrastructure work, some fiber work. So adding 150 will take us to 200, but we also need to put funding in. This primarily will be for the payment of the underpass, but there's a lot more work to do out in the GAP project. Exhibit 3 talks about our Marina Fund, and council already previously approved our contract with F3 Marina. So we're suggesting that we need to fund that through the budget amendment. Exhibit 4 these were all the changes we made to the general fund in general salaries and benefits. So for example, let's take unfilled position. We had a HR part-time position originally budgeted, not knowing how the year was going to turn out. We didn't budget anything for it. Same with detective, PD admin, an additional admin person, another seasonal person at the visitor center, wellness reimbursements, employee appreciation, and end of season. So these are what was originally budgeted, and what we ended up budgeting was about $46,000. Council may be interested in restoring some of those. Then in Exhibit 5, This is changes to positions primarily. So in the Community Development Department and the Public Works Department, we're asking council support to bring on folks who can fill in for longtime staff who are retiring. We have a key building inspector that's retiring out of CDD and a Public Works Department official who's retiring, and bringing these folks in early, I think, is important for cross-training. These incumbents have been here a very long time. In the Marina Fund, actually, we're needing to add a position, a Marina manager. If you recall, F3 did some analysis of the Marina and recommended a new structure that included the general manager position and then 3 other positions reporting to the general manager, retail sales manager, maintenance manager, we have those, and a Marina manager. The other positions we're recommending, as indicated in the narrative, for the Recreation, Adventure Park, and Nordic Center to help fill those positions. So those are the main and big ticket type of items. This is a time to talk about the lodging tax fund. So council has previously suggested that maybe we move some money around. Well, we also note that the visitor center bathrooms do need to be redone, and this could be a fund that pays for that. And that is alignment, we thought, with council's previous discussion that indicated we could use those funds to help reduce our costs in the general fund. So overall, our recommendations for the budget ordinance that we need to bring back to council is on the lodging tax, leave it at is, other than this 20,000 as noted in the recommendation. The capital improvement fund, 435, primarily for parks, 150,000 for GAP. And that currently is to finish the project as it is, but we will be needing additional funding for that. I just want to note that. Also, should the council, we've talked about doing the police department remodel. We've finished design. It's going to be released for bid any day now. If council wants to fund that, we want to know now. You don't have to make the decision to fund it, but it'd be helpful to put it in the ordinance now so we don't have to amend the budget again. So we're recommending 600,000 to go into the capital budget to cover that. Hopefully the bids will come under that, and council would still make the decision to award that or not later. The Marina Fund, 120,000. And then other changes in the general fund as shown on Exhibit 5 and 6. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and happy to take questions from council, comments, so on. And Bonnie, did you want to weigh in, please, first?
No, I don't really have any comments. I just wanted to reiterate what Nancy said early on in the discussion about the reasons that we have such variances in what we budgeted for ending fund balances were the steps that we took to make sure that we were able to sustain ourselves throughout the pandemic, which is still going on. So anyway, I just kind of want to reiterate those facts.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Nancy. And I also want to just thank staff as well. I know they got some tough marching orders right when the pandemic started to pretty much, if we didn't need it, don't buy it, don't pay for it, don't do anything. And I want to recognize the significant amount of money that staff was able to save the town from the very start of this, with what seemed to be small things here and there that added up greatly to put us in this position. So thank you all for your kind of financial wherewithal moving us through this whole past year. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to commend the whole team, because that outcome is achieved through 75, 100 people all making that same decision every day to be very conservative and be very careful and cautious. So everybody did a good job.
Appreciate that. Then I'd like to just kind of go down the list of the questions / recommendations and start with the lodging tax fund and how people feel about leaving some of that money in there for the potential bathroom upgrades. Or, you know, Dan, the lodging tax is kind of one of your areas of new expertise, and see how you feel about the staff recommendations or any other thoughts.
I think it's solid. My goal along was to kind of make that lodging tax fund a little bit more utilitarian. And, you know, that's not necessarily clear, but I think the VIC bathrooms would fall certainly under, you know, within, you know, the reasonable application of that fund money. So I certainly don't have a problem with that $20,000. And, you know, kind of bringing that, you know, recognizing that the VIC needs to be funded, and out of that, you know, in that fund, within that fund seems reasonable. And then having a conversation maybe a little bit later about other ideas about application of those fund dollars, I think might be appropriate. But in terms of what's here now, I certainly think that's a good idea and a good use of that.
Other folks' thoughts on the lodging tax fund and staff recommendations? Andrew's leaning in. Go ahead, Andrew.
If I support it. I'd also, you know, it needs to be done. We got the money. Let's do it. Also add to the list, because somewhere on my notes, meaning this was going to come up, but somewhere we should be doing the simple project of expanding Historic Park, having that on our continuing list of just moving the fence back to the other side of the alley. Cheap, easy, quick, but also expands Historic Park for hopefully what will be crowded Thursday nights. We'll see. But it can be done. We've got the money. Let's do that too.
I like the thought process and the direction there.
Are you suggesting, Councilmember Aronson, that we expand the historic park, add that fence to the project this summer?
Well, we have a useless alley there that everybody looks at and says, why is it there? And it's relatively simple to expand the park just by moving the fence to the other side of the alley. It's not an access road, so that you'll just hear me say that every time I get a chance to.
Okay, I would need council direction.
We can maybe look at that in another, yeah.
Simple.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you. I think that what staff is asking for, we should absolutely fund. I think what, you know, Andy, even though that's like an easy project, I think beyond what we're talking about funding at this moment, or what staff is looking for, which I pretty much support everything in there at this point, just so we don't have to take too much longer. The main thing is you know, with the funds that we still have, what are going to be our next steps? And that's what, you know, something I am definitely interested in talking about as far as the future projects that we want to take on that are already in our plan. So yes, use the funds out of the lodging tax for the bathroom.
Great. Melissa, are you in agreement?
I'm in agreement. Are we just on the visit on the?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of go down the list of.
Sounds good.
All right, then. Nancy, you good with that? We're in agreement with the lodging tax fund and staff's recommendations there. And we'll and another point circle around. I do know what Andrew's saying, and I completely agree with him, but I don't think quite yet. Maybe that goes to Andy Held's future. Look at other plans we have in place and how we want to start implementing some funds towards those. The capital improvement fund, in Exhibit 2, the budget appropriations for the $435,000. How do folks, anybody have any great concerns or questions on that one? Andrew.
Leaning in. I think if the only reason if everything on this list is going to come back to us next year, I would like to be more aggressive in our spending. Meaning, I don't know. I mean, I think we approved everything on here after prioritization. We did a great job of cutting back. But if these are things that are needed and these are things that we're going to be spending next year, and we have the money, a lot of it now, I respect staff time. It takes staff time to buy and do and project, but I also don't think it's worth waiting until however many months it is from now until we approve the next budget to address all of these items plus whatever may come up next year. So if there's a more aggressive approach we can take to tick these items off, let's do it now.
Andrew, does any of them kind of float to the top for you? Or are you specifically asking if for certain?
You know, the ones I highlighted, again, we see it every year. I've got alley paving, PRA project construction, council chambers. If we're doing it, let's do it. Bathrooms, we just said, okay. Town hall, atrium, I just lost my page. And all of the purchases on the bottom. All the things that are listed as 2022 budget. Why not do them now if we're in a position to be able to and we need it? And we had the money and we pulled it back, and for lots of good fortune and good reasons, we took the good conservative approach, but we didn't have to. That's the benefit of hindsight. So why aren't we spending it in the 2021 budget?
I appreciate that question. I think for me, I feel I'm still apprehensive about what summer brings and being conservative, but I know that's a flip of the script for me. Sometimes I'm usually in that spend, but I was a little spooked by the last year. So, but I'm not completely disagreeing. Melissa.
I guess partially a comment, partially a question. I support the recommendations of staff. I'd love to see some of this money come back. Is there a timing issue, being as we're 4 months into the year, and you know, for the biggest ticket item here, one of the biggest ticket items, well, the two for the playground, and then also the police facilities expansion. Are we behind the 8 ball so much that you know, this money is not going to be as effectively used as it would if we delayed? I mean, can you offer Bonnie or Nancy any insight on that?
Thank you, Councilmember Sherman. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So many of these on the capital list, you know, really can't be done. The PRA construction, hiring a consultant on the Central Core Gateway Plan. We have a new visioning process. This building relocation was a placeholder. Kitchen remodel is not necessary. Chamber upgrades, we've done those. So we took our time. You know, our recommendations are based on what can be done, what's necessary to be done, what do we have the capacity to do.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry if you already said that, but I think that's important to me, is if we're going to go for it, like for the parks, can we really, I know we kind of were up against the clock last year, and if we need to do that, it needs to start happening really quickly. So I'm glad you already thought of that, obviously.
Well, and we do have a lot of marina projects. So other things not on the capital. This is only the general fund capital. We have the marina capital we could bring up. We have the water capital projects we could bring up. We have a lot of other projects. So our capacity at this point in the year. So when we adopt a budget back in September, October, we're looking to see, you know, planning so that we can construct or whatever in the spring, in the early summer. So we are now into a place where what can we really do and what is necessary. Staff, we're given the assignment to look over all of these. What do they still really need? We have a 5-year capital plan. What can be deferred and what isn't? So to Councilmember Aronson's point, sure, we have money. There are a lot of priorities. This is just one list, the capital list. We're going to talk about the strategic plan in a minute. So there's a lot of other strategic priorities, you know, expanding the historic fence. So it's not a haphazard approach. We really were thoughtful and careful about what we can do. So as far as buying some of the other things like the e-bikes, we could buy those. But we would, if that's the direction of council, we'll bring back a strategic, thoughtful answer as to which of those are needed, or if we don't buy it now, are we delaying in the future? In addition to this, as I mentioned, there's 600,000 in the police remodel that's not in here, the GAP project. So other things to consider.
Andy Held, I know you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. You answered some stuff there, but you know, I think for what staff is asking for, I think is reasonable, although I do know that the GAP project that falls very short of what we're going to end up needing to do there. That's for sure. That starts at, I think, $250,000. So yeah, we could maybe identify a few other things that definitely need more. And maybe we should plug that in. I don't know that we should necessarily throw it all at everything. You know, I would like to, sorry, Andy, that's, you know, I'd like to maybe hold some back because we're still in the pandemic. And although I think this summer is going to be out of control as far as the number of people that are going to be here, in which case everybody should be able to be making money, as will we. We'll be in fine shape. But we're still not there yet. I think we should hold a little bit.
So one area you'll see in the strategic plan, we're behind on some of the efforts we want to do on fiber. If council is interested in supporting Councilmember Aronson's perspective that we want to spend more, that's not something we had heard before. So we can take that direction if there's council support for that and come back when we bring the ordinance with, all right, here's a couple other things we recommend that we can do, but we were very thoughtful about what was necessary, needed, and being continued to be conservative in our approach.
Dan.
I'm generally in the cautiously optimistic range of, you know, advocating for spending. I think for me, it comes down to opportunity costs and making sure that if there's stuff we can pursue now, and I'm looking at the you know, the bottom part of the capital budget where it's equipment acquisition, and I would be fine with moving ahead of any of that equipment acquisition. It's, you know, especially if I understood, I think, a little bit better the cost of maybe pushing that back one more year. If it makes sense to really get after that and we can source that and pursue it, then I don't have a problem with that level of spend. With Andy Held on the GAP project, I want to make sure we're ready to go on that. I don't want to lose an opportunity or have it cost, you know, if it's reasonable to expect that it's going to cost quite a bit more next year. I want to pursue what we can reasonably within the time frame that we have in this budget cycle, and be sensitive to opportunity costs. So I think there's some more that we can do. I certainly am going to advocate for pursuing for the police remodel and getting that out the door and getting that done. But there's a lot on here that I agree, Nancy, with your assessment from a staff perspective that it's, you know, this year, next year. I don't think, you know, it's that time sensitive. So, but I could see doing a little bit more, but moving ahead a little bit more cautiously. So Nancy, your approach to maybe coming back with a few more suggestions, I think I would support.
Okay, and Councilmember, I also want to let you know that we've just received word as well that we're likely going to have to replace the fuel tank, which is going to be $600,000. So one of the requests we have on the strategic plan is for an asset management and replacement plan, and that is late. A lot of things that you'll see that are late is primarily because of our priorities that got all switched around in 2020. That asset management replacement plan, once it's finished, we'll have a funding mechanism and it'll be added to our 5-year plan. So we won't have these one-offs. Oh, the fuel tank is busted and we need to replace it. It's $600,000. We need a strategic 5-year plan that invests in and constantly gets updated, that we're investing in all of these assets and replacement. So I see a lot of money that is still needed. And when we ask staff to come back with what they think they can do and what they think is a high priority based on everything they know that maybe not was known 6 months ago, this was their recommendation. So we can come back if council does support. All right, you're willing to add a little bit more and take a second pass at it. Happy to do that. There's agreement.
You're gonna be held.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate all the work this is taking. You know, I think identifying things like fiber, or at least the conduit for fiber. You know, like there's a number of things in there that we got to make sure we do while we're doing that project. We can't skip out on things like that.
And yeah, I mean, I think I'm falling into it staff looked at this, and I trust their perspective on making sure that they're taking care of infrastructure, facilities, and everything else, and their time. So I'm in support of all of these. Maybe if there's a few things you could prioritize is from the bottom of that list of the purchase things, we could maybe look as we go to read this in the first reading to see how we feel about those. But I think there are big, the fuel system is scary. I think fiber is crucial to our strategic plan and our goals. So I think not overspending now because it was on this list makes sense to me.
I did ask Jeff, and he's on the call as well, to do an analysis on the fuel station. You might remember about a year ago, I'm not sure if it was pre-COVID or not, we started looking at whether or not we really want to be in the business of being essentially a gas station for everyone. And he's looking at that. So when it comes back, there'll be analysis of status quo, replace the tank, or maybe do outside. And since Jeff weighed in, Council, would you be okay if he also weighed in on the GAP project as to what we're going to get for the 200, and what I think your estimate on the second round is close over to $1 million, Jeff? If
Yeah, that's correct. Good evening, Council. The money we're requesting for, the additional monies for the GAP project we're requesting are mainly to cover our share of the grant and the match for the underpass that we were not billed for last year because the project's not done yet. So they're not billing it out until the project is finished. Even though the underpass is complete, the entire project is not finished, and the grant was tied to the project. So our share of that is $150,000. The other $50,000 is to do things such as get those fiber conduits put under the highway so that we're not doing that later on down the road after we have a nice, pretty new highway and we're digging it up again. So we're trying to make sure we've got the finances we need to make that happen, as well as all the conduit sleeves between the medians for future lighting, future irrigation, all of that kind of stuff, so that we're not digging into any paved surfaces. As far as the fuel tanks go at the public workshop, we are looking at that. My fleet foreman, Michael Nation, and Addison are in talks with the county to find out what that looks like, if we could refuel there. So we're also looking at what the possibilities are and the ramifications are of doing some sort of fleet card system where we would fuel up at a local fuel station. But there's a whole bunch of different ramifications with taxes and everything else that we don't pay now as a government entity. So we are looking into that, and I'm hoping to have that whole thing wrapped up in the next week or two to come back to you with. As far as the asset plan, I must apologize, that has been delayed, but I have been working feverishly on it, and it will be completed, and it will be before you on April 27th.
And Jeff, while you're here, could you weigh in on capacity and the other projects? And you did a lot of analysis on why you're recommending this modest re-establishment of some of the capital.
Yes, our capacity in Public Works right now to do project management is almost full. We could probably add a few more smaller projects, but you know, some projects that we could add, like you mentioned, would be to purchase some of the equipment. I'd have to go back and look. There is some equipment that's coming out of warranty or that is out of warranty that might be beneficial to replace before they break down and are not covered under warranty. The police department is already all designed, so that RFP will go out here hopefully in the next week or two. So that one's going to be fine. All the marina projects are in full bore, if you will. RFPs and bids are due for the lift station again this Friday. All those will be in front of you. The building and the lift station and the fuel system at the marina will be before you at your next council meeting for contract approval, should you desire. So, you know, there's other projects out there like the alley paving that are already designed, and we could lump those in with some of the asphalt repair that we're doing. So while we are very busy and our plate is very full with projects, there is opportunity to add a couple of small ones that are already designed and on the shelf, if you will.
Okay, so we can bring that back then with the, if we have a sense that it looks like you guys are open to that. Okay.
Yep, that'd be great.
Thank you, Jeff. It's very helpful.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to see you. Sorry, I'm juggling schedules. So with that, everybody, council's good enough to bring all those, move those forward with a couple extra possibilities to discuss. All right, and how about the, I want to specifically call out the police department, and the staff recommendation to include 600,000 as a line item for that project, their support in continuing that work. See thumbs up, double thumbs up. Melissa's going to vote twice, and she's got my support there too. So yep, let's.
Voting by proxy for Missy.
Yeah. Great. I think that's I'm to the chief and his staff. I'm sorry we did have to postpone that, and I appreciate you guys bearing with us, but that's important to me as well. So happy we can move forward with that. The Marina Fund and the staff recommendations there with funding the contract that we've already engaged with 120,000. Folks are good with that. Excellent. That makes that easier.
Yeah, that's.
And what else am I missing? Sorry,
The other ones are a little less straightforward. So let me just share the screen again. So Exhibit 4 is the general fund. We did not make any recommendation to restore any of these items. But in Exhibit 5, we made specific recommendations to bring these 2 positions in and to do the reorganization in the marina and the additional positions in recreation and venture park and so on. So Exhibit 4 and 5. I can leave it up or stop sharing.
I think council should have those. I prefer seeing folks.
Faces.
Any faces are better. Questions or anybody have issues with both Exhibit 4 and 5 as staff recommended?
5 is more straightforward. It's a full swath.
Yep. 5 is the big one. I think I appreciate we tried the 10-month full-time employee, but it didn't work out, and it was a good try. Dan, go ahead. Sorry, I saw you.
I have a question, and not sure if this is really connected to anything, and maybe the chief can weigh in. But I'm struck by the wage represented for a detective and the other compensatory, or at least the other compensation for, say, something like Public Works building super. And I'm struck by the level of experience and skill that must be represented in trying to find somebody who can represent, that kind of acumen, that kind of breadth of experience, and then also fit into our position. And it strikes me as being absurdly low. And I don't, not really familiar with how that fits into the scale, Chief, from where you're at down to entry level patrollers. But it just struck me that that's to attract somebody who ostensibly, at least from my understanding, and please feel free to disabuse me of this if I'm way off base, but can you get good people at that price? That's $28 an hour, so and my guess is that somebody in that position is bringing an awful lot to the table.
Mm.
Well,
go ahead, Chief.
Dan, I agree with you. I mean, we don't have the position right now. Starts at 58 and maxes at 87. It might be a little bit different than that, but yeah, I mean, someone that has experience would obviously want more. However, our folks have stepped up. In fact, Robinson did a great job with this search warrant on this guy that tried to run over officers. We got about 35 grams of methamphetamine off this vehicle that he searched the other day. So they did a good job of that. Long term, it would certainly be nice to have a detective to fill in, for the officers, because they do a lot of preliminary stuff on the front end, and they need a detective to follow up on it. So that's a good question.
And also, council, I'd have to check to see if that's part of our new salary schedule, because we increased the police officer salaries significantly more than any other positions in the town about 1.5 years ago. We raised them all quite a bit, and each year they were getting quite a big increases. So this would be, that position hasn't been filled for 5 years, maybe 6.
I know it's been 3.
That's not salaries and benefits. That's just a straight amount to add to the budget. What you're seeing in Exhibit 5 is the full cost of an employee, because there is nothing in the budget at all for those positions. So we have to account for the full cost, benefits, salaries, taxes, everything. The other position we budgeted, and then there's always a lot of salary savings to help cover the difference. Bonnie, do you know if that reflects the current salary of the detective? I don't have it. Okay, sure. I read her lips. She said, let me look.
It's teamwork. Dan, I think I appreciate that, catching that, Dan, and calling that to light, because that is a good point.
I'm not sure that's the right number.
Yeah.
So should we start with Exhibit 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think it seemed like we had
Oh,
council support on staff recommendations for Exhibit 5. Is that true? Any council have
okay.
questions or concerns with that?
Then Exhibit 4, if there's any changes to Exhibit 4.
Andy, and then Dan, I saw you guys put your hands up.
Yeah, just along those lines. I mean, is that typical in mountain towns for pay? I agree, it's too low, right? It's not enough to survive here, let alone have that kind of stressful job. So, yes, let's fund what you're asking for, Nancy, but
Not
eventually,
this exhibit. This is totally council. There's no recommendation here. It's, do you want to make any adjustments? We cut about 220,000 out of the budget on all of these items. Some of them, the 10-month, we've already taken care of in the other exhibit. I mean, do you want to bring back the unfilled position? PD admin, I would have the chief weigh in whether we actually need that now, but we just put in exactly what was in the budget, so I don't have a recommendation. This was really council call whether you want to add these things in.
right? I think I would hate to put more on our officers at this point, I mean, so we need to fill that position. That's important. If we need to bump that salary up to make it actually competitive, we should do that too.
See, the salary range is 58,000 to 87,000.
And then they have a second option if they come in with experience now in the new
Exactly.
schedule. So they go up by something like 10 or 15% or something.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy.
So that position has not been filled for over 5 years, so.
3 years.
3. Mhm.
Dan, and then Andrew, and then I've got a question. Yeah, go ahead.
To follow up on Andy, what you said in terms of, what we think is reasonable to invest in. And if we think it's reasonable to scrape up money for a new, it's important for a new, snowcat, for example, the Nordic Center. I certainly think it's time to come back to the staffing and start to approach full staffing levels, because the work that this staff has done for the last year, under the most arduous of circumstances, the multitasking that's been going on, how they've been able to move in and out of departments and wear a multitude of hats. And I'm cautiously optimistic that, I think more so than that, but as we start to come back up to speed, we're going to need people manning their stations, I would think. And it's really time to kind of get people back where they need to be. And along those lines, it's time to return and acknowledge for the work that's been done, make sure the end of season bonuses are back, make sure that employee appreciation and wellness, get the compensation package back to where it's supposed to be, and recognize the work that's been done, because those are the people who got us there. If Hunter, to your well-founded concern about the economy making hopefully not a hard U-turn, but if it doesn't respond as well, then I think, it won't nearly be as dire as what we dealt with back in April. So I think it's important right now, at least in that part, to really address the staffing needs, fill those positions, and get the compensation package back to where it's supposed to be.
Thanks, Dan. I would agree with that. Andrew, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, a couple things on Exhibit 4. I don't remember what installation of smoke and fire alarms for Woods and Nemeth are, but if we're not doing it, there better not be a fire there until we do it. So I don't know what that meant, but for $3,000, I sure think we should put in smoke alarms if that's what we're talking about. And as far as unfilled positions, again, I'm of the belief that we got money in every pocket right now. We can take care of what needs to be taken care of. And so if those are positions that are needed, if they're positions that need to be increased in order to get filled, we can look at that. There's a whole different, again, I'm going to raise a whole different conversation, but we spend a lot of money trying to house people who don't make enough money to afford to live here. And then we as a town probably are part of the problem, not part of the solution to what our wages are. So if we want to walk the walk or talk the talk, let's at least at some point consider walking the walk of what should everybody be making as a town employee so that they can successfully live here. And I think we can take advantage of the COVID situation if the bonus program was not what it really should have been, as opposed to just going back and putting it the way it was before. If it needed to be retooled, then this is the opportunity to do that. But if it needs to be there to make us equitable relative to the other employers in this county, then we should be considering putting it back on. So staff recommendation, my direction to staff is spend the necessary money to make us the town that we say we should be and get our employees what they deserve.
Thanks, Andrew. That was well said. Andy held with a big thumbs up. So looking at Exhibit 4, am I hearing council kind of pushing to refund all of those positions and the few things that were not funded in the original budget? Is that what I'm understanding? Melissa's thumbs up. Andy held a thumbs up. Andrew, yep. Did you hear that? So in Exhibit 4, Nancy, I think council direction is if we can refund all of those things.
Yeah.
And if we need to, and can I just touch on Andy Aronson, and I think Dan would agree on this. If we need to address those salaries for some of those positions as well, can we maybe look at that and bring that back for the first reading to see if, as I think Andrew said it perfectly, we can't be part of our own problem. So let's make sure we're taking care of people the way we'd want to. So.
Definitely heard that. Thank you very much. Happy to pass that on to staff for sure.
How does council feel about bringing on 2 or hopefully being able to hire replacements for our retiring staff members while they're still here, so we can double up and they can kind of learn on the job from the pros we have in place?
I think that's smart. That's smart business.
So that would be the community development department position and the public works position. So support for that as well.
Thank you. That's in Exhibit 5 as well. So.
Yep, Exhibit 5. And then also in Exhibit 5 is the Adventure Park and kind of reshuffling some of those job descriptions to make them more viable for folks. Does anybody have questions around those that make sense in the staff report? We support that change. Sounds good. Other questions, Nancy, or anything we left off? I'm jumping between pages here.
That is it.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We will take that direction, amend our budget, and bring back a budget amendment for you at the second meeting in April.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Bonnie. And thanks again to everyone's hard work and allowing us, as Andrew said, money in all our pockets. So that comes from staff doing an amazing job as well. So I appreciate it.
Sure, staff would be saying thank you very much. I'm sure they're very appreciative of all of this. Thank you, council.
Yes, I can't wait to tell them, because I'm sure they're all listening and they watch this later.
Yeah, they're on the YouTube channel watching. So
no, thank you very much. They are a hardworking team, very, very hardworking folks. Very proud of them.
Next, sorry, as I bring the agenda back up, is item number 4, and this is our 2020-2021 strategic plan update.
Oh, wait, Dan has a question.
Sorry, Dan. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry, I was on a different screen. I apologize.
Sorry to kind of keep this bouncing along under the budget, under Exhibit 3, new requests. I've got one. And I bet none of you know what it is. But here goes. I think it's time, and one of the things we learned this winter, if you followed what's going on in the world of news of ICE, I would really want to create a placeholder to really explore at staff level what would be involved and what the opportunity would look like to envision a community ICE amenity. I don't want to go too much farther than descriptors than that. And what it would mean to an area possibly like being an anchor tenant at the marina, if that would beget a conversation about a winter development plan for the marina and associated challenges down there. So we could get to the point where, as a community, we can say, this is not something that we want to pursue. And at least I can move on. But this winter, you're watching what was going on at Meadow Creek Park. We developed our own little, to some degree, under the radar ICE amenity at Walter Byron that was incredibly well received, albeit possibly not necessarily according to Hoyle, but it really demonstrated in all the conversations that I had to the neighborhood families that used it, the importance of having a well-maintained ICE amenity that transcends kind of low-level neighborhood ICE. And this is not, and Jeff, this is meant for you and your staff who worked really hard on keeping Meadow Creek viable. It's a great kind of, it's a great low-level ICE amenity that really doesn't rise to, in my role, to the level of making it to the town of Frisco page, for example, because it's just not that consistent, and it can't be broadly utilized by the community in terms of planning. There's no parking there. It's difficult to access at times. But that being said, at the level that it is in terms of what it is, it was incredibly well utilized. So I think it's time, really think about this, what it would mean to an area like the marina to have that at the end of Main Street, and really kind of go down the list of opportunities that it represents. And, I don't want to put a number on it, but I would say, I would suggest a $500,000 placeholder to say, look, let's put it in the budget. Let's see where this conversation lands after it's been really vetted at a very high level. Come back with a staff report, have this conversation at council level, talk about the opportunity, and really think about this for next winter. So, like to hear some thoughts, but now's the time, to kind of, at least in my world, the Fisher cut bait. I've had talked to so many people in the community who, as the ICE we have is more utilized, are surprised that that's where it stops. So anyway, I'd like to get some thoughts on
that. I'll start, Dan. I think putting in a placeholder of 500,000 is a huge jump for me without knowing. I mean, you say anchor tenant, and I think third party vendor for that type of thing. So I don't see the cost there, but I'm definitely in support of putting money in to see what is viable. If it is, getting a vendor agreement for someone else to do it and see what that looks like, or if it is better something that the town operates. And I'd prefer to set the placeholder for some to do the research and figure out what would be the most attractive or possible there, and then do a budget amendment once we have ideas of what that will cost moving forward. And I completely support that. I think jumping to a $500,000 line item for something that I'm not exactly sure what it is. And I'd love to see who was Idaho Springs and their success with their rink this winter, because I think they did the plastic ice and see how that went and see what's out there and find out what it takes to do this. But to jump all in with and I know placeholders are just that, but I'd rather see what we're looking at. But I'd be happy to fund that, the initial research part of it, and then do a budget amendment or put it in the following year's budget. But that would be my take. But yeah.
And the point is that what you just brought up is exactly the point of that conversation is, based on the level of community investment, what's the best way to operate it? And that would be, and I expect that to be part of that conversation. This is not an easy thing. And, but if executed at the level that I would expect we would do it, it would be an incredible community amenity. So, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't disagree with where you're coming from. I picked a number just based on what I know certain different types of ice and the associated infrastructure would cost. And like I said, but as long as, there's a real considered effort to really dive into this and explore the cost, explore the operations, really kind of understand what it means to the community, then yeah, if we could pivot on the back end of that, then that's fine.
Andrew.
Dan, I agree with we know we have the land. We know we are pretty sure we have the need. And I contend that as long as it stays pretty reasonable, we probably have the money. What we don't know is what do we want? And so I totally think it's a great idea to start pursuing the options for an ice surface, whether it's a pavilion, a full service facility, or whatever it might be. I have no idea. But I think it's a conversation we should be moving forward. And I like your timing, by the way. You obviously did it the right way about I should have waited and put it in as an additional expense for my little historic park project. So good job with your timing of how you presented that one.
We'll finish with Dan's proposal, Andrew, and we'll give you another chance.
I got my 2 cents in. We're good.
Melissa.
I totally support it. I feel like we've been kind of dancing around this conversation for a couple years and never gotten really serious about it. And I think we should. And an ice rink, to me, aligns with the character and vision of our community. We've had a number of other sort of recreational activities brought forth a lot over the years that we've decided do not meet our community character. And I think an ice rink does. And so I'd love to see us get serious about it and go from there.
With that kind of council support, I think it's a consultant to come in to study. If you're talking ice rink, you'd want to look at cost benefit, just like we did on the field house, something like that. You could probably do that for 40, 50,000 easily to get that study. That would be quick. That's different than an ice rink this winter type of idea. Ice rink about, a big facility requires a consultant, bringing somebody in to maybe produce and stand up a small ice skating
I think what I was talking about was an outdoor facility like Dan has always described, not an indoor rink at all.
Yeah, right.
I know there is some discussion in the community about maybe bringing forward a rink and using some of our other lots, not just the marina. So I want to be clear what we're going to study and understand where we're going.
I would hope and maybe Dan correct me, and I want to make sure Andy gets in here, but I mean, I'm picturing a wintertime amenity that as soon as the temperatures don't warrant it, it disappears, and whatever that piece of earth was before this goes back to whatever it was, be it the park, parking, food truck court at the marina, and not a premise.
We're not hopefully studying any one particular application because we don't know. I think based on the infrastructure that's out there and what the land can support and what's around there, I think those things lend themselves to a certain type of application with a certain amount of visitation. But, I think we'd study what's possible, and the spectrum could include, 1,000 square feet of glice, which of course I don't want to do anything less than what would be consistent with how we represent our other amenities. I think it has to be, the bar needs to be set pretty high in terms of quality of the amenity, but in terms of scope, the rink is no, I think there's a lot of what we can do out there, and a lot of other communities are doing and exploring and building are much lower level stuff, but refrigerated, long season, reliable conditions. That's the kind of thing that allows people to invest their time, allow programs to invest plans for utilization. It allows people to invest, whether it's a concessionaire or not. So I think there's certain things that once we kind of start checking some boxes, it'll become more clear. But Nancy, to your point, rink is not something that I ever envisioned, especially not at the marina because of the way that area is utilized. So, I want this conversation to deliver some of those, to kind of frame that conversation. I'm not saying anything except the quality needs to be high.
Agreed. Andy?
Yeah, I'm willing to explore new revenue generating amenities for us that will give customers better experiences, for sure. I do know recently I spoke pretty in depth with somebody about putting up a temporary ice rink, and $400,000 to $500,000 is kind of the bottom line to like refrigerate something, and if that's going to be temporary, what's that going to generate in the year? I would like to know, if we're going down this road, what kind of revenue we can generate, as far as if we're renting skates and what comes out of that, and is this just for go down and the locals to go skate at? That's going to be an expensive amenity. So I think going down the road is fine. I think this is a high maintenance item. Like this will take a lot of effort to maintain and whatnot, and I wonder if the revenue's there, or the ability. But I'm willing to go down that road and look at it. So I think that's probably fine.
To be clear, we spent $750,000 on a skate park that people just go down and skate at. Bike trails and things of that nature are not revenue producing amenities, but they're part of the culture. They're part of drawing people here who stay here to explore those kind of opportunities that we create, that's part of engaging the natural environment. And I can't imagine a cooler place to skate under the stars and right down there at the marina with the moon shining on Grays and Tories back there. So, I understand there's a cost, but there's I think a lot more revenue generating potential here than really we're even aware of at this point. I've got some good ideas because I've certainly done some spitballing with some folks for the last 6 months, but it's out there. And again, this is not inconsistent at its worst with amenities that we've already created. So that's just a final thought there.
So council good if we put in the budget $50,000 to hire the right consultant to figure out what is viable and what the options are? Andrew, Andy, yes. Melissa, you good? And Dan, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Someday I'll bring up my dog park that gets better community support in every survey we've had than any ICE has ever gotten. But I'll get to my dog park at another time when we talk about moving fences in the historic park.
Well, Melissa talked about banging a drum, and I'm telling you, I've been banging that drum. I can't hear anything. I've been banging that drum.
Sorry, I apologize for moving on too quickly there, Dan. I was on the wrong page. Anybody else on the budget before we move on? Just want to make sure everybody had their piece. And I know hopefully Nancy will have conversations with Rick and Jesse as well. So then we can move on to the 2020-2021 strategic plan update. And I'm pretty excited about this because it was, it really caught me not by surprise, but made me proud to see how many things on that list showed that we accomplished it and all that we've been through in the last year. And it goes back to, I think, what we've all said about our town staff and the leadership we have across the board. The through the pandemic and everything else and all the pivots and adjustments, we still have done an amazing job kind of meeting our strategic plan goals that this council has set. And that's admirable across the board. And I want to recognize that before Nancy starts, because there was a lot achieved that I think didn't go noticed or given its credit. So thank you. And with that, Nancy, I will turn it over.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor. I appreciate those comments. I think strategic planning works when you actually take it from a plan to implementation. And I appreciate that introduction as well, because we're high performers. So we'd like to say everything is on a record, only satisfied with a level. But of course, the pandemic did come and pivot us to different directions. And it's unfortunate it's not really reflected in the update. So I try to reflect it a little bit. I think I made a mistake in not putting the strategic plan before the budget when we were figuring out how to put the analysis, because being strategic about the decisions for what you're going to spend is key to accomplishing the goal that you've set out. So I think probably should have tweaked that. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. I know it's not your favorite thing, but I won't do it too long, but it's just a lot easier. So this is our March update. We've obviously maintained our priorities, and we've maintained the beautiful pictures of council members. We have them all now with nice backgrounds. What we added in here this time around also was to take a moment and pause. That previously our vision was a lot of words, and the words matter. And through our conversations with Insights Collective, we've helped to frame it up a little bit. It also provided an opportunity to reflect in the strategic plan update that there is a pandemic, and it did affect our ability to accomplish everything that was in the plan. Now, this was only adopted about 6 months ago. So we're really just talking about things that have happened in the last 6 to 9 months or so. Some things were in play already. But we wanted to reflect, or I wanted to reflect, that we took some time to think about visioning, and I wanted to reflect that the pandemic occurred and it affected some of our progress. So we added this to the report. What you have throughout the report is the priority. It's all laid out exactly the same. The priority of council, who's responsible, what the key milestone date was, and what our status is. I think I'm going to presume the council went through this on their own and can. So we're going to zip through it for the public record. So while I recognize you've read it, I'm really also speaking on behalf of you to the public. And we want to talk about what we've accomplished. So council set a high priority goal last summer to increase full-time residency to 50%. The more we've dug into this goal and had the visioning and combine it with the other goal of creating 5-year housing capital plan, I really think going forward, these two need to be blended together because they really can't operate without the other. We're going to try to attract more full-time residents, but we need to do it through housing. By doing good housing programs, we're going to attract more full-time residents. So we've put on here that we delayed some of this work because that's how we originally set out this plan. And why the fiber telecom system is under this goal is because we talked about at your work session last summer that having good fiber is about making sure we can attract full-time residents. So that's why it's in this goal. We hope to have an RFP issued out this spring to kind of help us improve that. Based on your earlier conversation, I think you'll be willing to fund it. That's why this should have gone first. So it would help you in making those decisions. The strategic plan is your lens by which you look at projects to fund. So our housing plan is on track, and what we mean by on track is related to the milestone dates. You just heard all about the CDOT project. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished in really trying to get CDOT together. We took longer to get the CDOT agreement signed by all the parties than the studio team and our council member subcommittee team and staff have done in putting the conceptual designs together. So great job on that. Our RFP for the 3rd and Granite Street Sabatini lot, 275 Granite, is expected to be out any day. Our social equity plan is delayed a little bit because we had trouble scheduling. It's now on our schedule for May. council did do work, and we should have reflected that here in the update. It met with community members, and in fact, I'll amend that. We met with community members, we engaged in developing a plan. We took the plan to council, hired a consulting team, but the consulting team could not meet the timeline we had. So they're coming in May. So I'll update that one. The Granite Street and Galena Complete Streets planned. This is pretty far behind schedule from what we originally planned was to get an RFP out. Speaking with a local community member by email today about the idea that this might be a great opportunity this summer to really dig in on this plan. So with council's previous discussion, I think we'll include, if you're good with this, we'll include in our capital amendment funding to get this done, the planning and design. Because again, this should have gone first because it helps you figure out what we need to fund. Funding these strategic priorities will deliver the outcomes you're seeking. So if you're good with that, if you're not, let me know, but we would hire the consultants, get on and get this designed done. On our thriving economy priority, developing a Main Street economy, we talked about this in doing a Main Street master plan that was originally in the capital plan based on your earlier discussion. I'll go back to the CDD team and find out if they think they have capacity to get that going. We're a little bit on track. We've had the Insights Collective team come. We don't know if, as you'll see here on our plan, we were going to focus on economic recovery. Well, when we put the plan together, we really thought there was going to be a need for a real economic recovery plan. We don't see that yet. So right now we would focus only on those industries in prolonged struggle. Locally, that's our small bed and breakfast. They are in a prolonged struggle. Their recovery never happened. If you look at the sales tax data reports that I've sent to you, you can see that while restaurants recovered throughout the year, our small lodging properties did not. They've held on, they've acquired grants and the town has supported them, but may need to see a need to help them in recovery. Producing a Main Street master plan, that's not in our capital budget. If council wants us to go ahead and fund that, we can. That was looking at a lot of code amendments as well. The GAP project, this you just heard, we really want to wait to go out for an RFP on design because we want to be able to attract a lot of public art here. It's a great opportunity for landscaping and art combined. It's an opportunity to tell your story to every single person going by on the highway. But in order to do that, we really want to have good pictures and a good framework by which to put in the RFP. So we are recommending holding on this one till the project is substantially complete by the fall. We'll have really great pictures, better schematics, and then we can put that out. The fiber connectivity townwide really does multiple levels, increase the amount of connectivity through a dig once policy. We've adapted the policy, but we want to put out the RFP that's in the other priority. And Vanessa has been working on ways in which to use our town facilities. And as you know, we just had two this is not fiber, but AT&T connectivity. It hasn't made significant improvements, I will say. We do want to put out the RFP for fiber, and we'll do that under the other priority. You will note here in the sustainable environment, I'm going to just take a quick little blur through here and you can see all of the on track green items. I think this is clearly reflective of the fact that we hired an environmental programs coordinator and she is getting all of these things done. It's reflective of when you have staff, they can focus on these kind of projects. We did our best before, but really able to attack each of these priorities of council, deliver outcomes to get them done. That is her sole focus. That's what she does all day. So you'll see all of the updates she's provided. These are Gilly's updates. She's provided a lot of updates for us, expanding the EV stations as well. I think there's a lot of work going on there. The PV retrofit at town facilities, you can read her update here and including net zero. There's a lot of work on that. I know I'm losing you. I can see all of you guys like going, okay, I can read. And then all of these are on track as you can see. Our climate action plan, we're on track, we're completing. Our arts and culture on track. You know all about the marina. We've done significant work there. Walter Consultants, you might not know, we hired them to do long-term planning, circulation plan. I'll point that out. You can see things that are ahead of schedule, things that are on track. Again, this particular department kills it by really being able to have a lot of staff to focus and getting a lot of the work done. Increase and encourage art in public spaces. I just want to give a little shout out to Make Frisco here. We met with them the other day. They're excited about new projects taking on potentially the promenade, community art as well. And I'll bring that up here in a minute under COVID. Quality core services. This is our asset management plan. It is delayed, but you just heard Jeff talk about that. That was actually a really high priority. We want to get that done. COVID had taken on a lot of other priorities through the town. I'm really happy to report that our digitizing of government services town-wide, one of our council members who isn't here tonight, really, this was a high priority that she talked about quite a bit. Rest of the council, I know it mattered to all of you as well. Really happy to report almost everything is digitized now. Almost everything. You can make your payments. Our plans can be submitted electronically to other agencies. You can pay that online. So many things have been improved. Huge shout out. I know Deborah's listening. The clerk's office has done a good job on getting these things done as well. All of the departments, I would have to say, I'm not even sure if there's a department that hasn't been involved in this, done a good job at digitizing their activities. The 5-year financial plan, really, we have a 3-year financial forecast. I'd like to see that pushed out 5 years, but it's kind of hard to predict. We've really improved public engagement with town council. Thank you to Vanessa and the entire team out there for everything they're doing to really encourage engagement. We're now completely online, as you know. We have a better agenda process externally. It's still pretty challenging internally. It makes a little bit more work. We have computers and new cameras in the council chambers. When you get back in there, we'll be able to, you'll see how that works. Our town code was a little bit delayed. You can see why there, but that's going to be up and going. Officer training, we've purchased the body cameras. This is related to SB 217. We hope to have those going by July 1st. They must be trained and everything before they can get turned on. I'd like to see the department move on to a new recruitment strategy. That is delayed. They're so busy working that it's hard to get them to work on something that's like recruitment strategy. It's a catch-22, so we need to improve that. Throughout this strategic plan, embedded in the report that you don't see are 100 plus 120 and 30 employees who kill it. They do everything they can to make sure that the priorities are part of their identity that they have at work. They understand the strategic plan matters. All of our departments have really rolled up their sleeves and got a lot done. You don't see finance work in there. You don't see the COVID work in there. You don't see all of the day-to-day tasks and activities. These are about strategic goals on top of our work to try to deliver the outcomes you're seeking. So happy to report we're on track on a lot of it. What we're delayed on, there's reasonable reasons for that. And the report, I think the plan helps them stay on track.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Nancy. Anybody questions, statements around the strategic plan and the vision? Yeah, and I think it's all the little work that doesn't fit into that can go unnoticed that I appreciate so much. So from everyone.
Phenomenal job putting that all together. Thank you.
We bring those, but we try to bring them every 6 months, but we'll see. That's it.
Just to thank you for the updates. These are great.
Thank you so much. It's important to staff, I think, to have the updates and hear what you think about. If you want to add a historical, move the fence. If you want to add a priority, we've just added a new one, evaluate ice amenities. We'll add it to the strategic plan. It helps to know that you're adding priorities and where that fits in with the rest of the things. Fence, historical fence, anybody? There's some utilities out there.
Yes.
Yes, at least, yeah. If everybody's familiar with it, I'll take my chime in of why not? It should have been done in 1853. But what the hell, today's as good a time to do it as then. So if somebody can take a look and see if there's a reason not to do it, I would love to know that. But otherwise, let's do it.
I'm with you. We'll go walk the alley, Andrew. We'll see what we can, maybe we'll just do it ourselves. Great. Anything else? Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. Moving on then this evening, we are on to our consent agenda. And motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Councilmember Fallon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Is there any further discussion on the consent agenda? Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Aronson,
Yes.
Burley, absent. Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Hinkin, absent. Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to new business. This is agenda item number 1, resolution 21-07, a resolution authorizing the mayor and the town clerk to execute that certain agreement for architecture services for the Village Center building at Frisco Adventure Park in the amount not to exceed $197,670. I will now open up the public hearing and turn it over to Diane for the staff report. Diane, welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's really nice to see you this evening. Good conversation, and hopefully we will continue that at this point in time. I'm going to ask for Katie Barton here to also turn on her camera and unmute herself if she can. There we go. Katie Barton, for those of you who do not know, is the general manager of the Frisco Adventure Park. She's been instrumental here in this RFP, as well as these interviews, as well as this request that is before you this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Katie, but of course I will stay on the line in case there are additional questions from me as well.
Thanks, Diane. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for having us tonight and hearing us. We'll kind of get right into it. As you have seen in your staff reports, we have a contract and a resolution for the Village Center building. This is a familiar project for some here, but just to give a little history, we did go down the road in 2019 of creating a new office and storage building, but due to consistently high costs and maybe a lack of where we wanted to go in the future, where we see the PRA 10, 15 years from now, Council decided to stop this project, take a step back, and kind of look at the PRA as a whole. This has led us to the comprehensive vision and project implementation plan. This plan was adopted in October of last year. And with the adoption of this project or of this plan has now led us to the Village Center building. The Village Center building is a high priority in Tier 1 as the plan lays out. So we have put this project out for bid. We have received 4 RFPs, and at this time, staff is recommending OLC for this project, as you had stated, Mr. Mayor, with not to exceed the amount of $197,670.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate that. Before we go to public comment, is there any questions about the project for staff? All right, seeing none, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment on this proposal? And seeing none, close public comment, back to council discussion, perhaps a motion. Let's say, Katie, looks like you're coming to us live from the PRA itself this evening. I appreciate that.
I am. My house is a little hectic to do these types of things in.
Yeah, it's good to find a quiet space these days.
It is.
Is there perhaps a motion from council to approve the moving forward with the contract?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion approving resolution 21-07.
It's been moved by Councilmember Fallon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Held. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can you call the question, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Burley, absent. Fallon,
Yes.
Held,
Yes.
Hinkin, absent. Sherburne,
We missed you, Melissa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
thank you. Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Katie, thank you. Diane, appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
to
you.
all of you.
Moving on to old business, and this is our continued general discussion and action on the COVID-19 response. Now I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Mayor and Council, I don't have much of an update, but I did want to, under this category, just give you a quick update on Promenade because that's under COVID. Just want you to know we have a pretty big team in place. We are moving forward with Jeff and his team are working with CDOT to develop the traffic plan and make sure they're good with that. That'll give us the stage and the framework for what we want to accomplish in terms of what space we have. The might forget who is assigned to everything, but Vanessa and Deborah and team are working with businesses, and Don and Bill and all of those folks working with businesses to find out who wants to take advantage of parklets and the space on Main Street, make sure that our licenses are in place through the state for the alcohol sales to be outside the business. That's a state issue, not a town issue, although we administer it. Also, we'll probably be bringing back the emergency ordinance that gives the town manager authority to enter into an agreement with those folks for the use of the public space. We also had a great meeting with the Make Frisco folks to look at ways to bring in art and that sense of community. It was great. Some of the ideas are to have artists develop some design that goes over the barriers that are filled with water. They have to be kept white on one side, primarily for traffic, but on the other side could be a beautiful painting or a picture or something they design. We can have those made. So we're working with that. Other ways to do art throughout the promenade and make sure that we answer that both the community and the council's direction to encourage more art and promote more local artists. So they're working, there's a couple teams working different things. Also ideas to have some murals. We're putting out an RFP, but we'll bring that back to council. There's just so many things going. I'm sure I'm going to forget, but big team coming together to bring back a plan. We hope to have it on the council agenda second meeting in April, if not first meeting in May. We don't see a way of opening it before the middle of June, middle to end of June. This promenade will be just like the last one in the sense it can go up and go down at council direction. We plan to have a plan that is very beautiful in context and color and really brings the community in to meet your vision as you discuss with like Insights Collective. Excited about the project overall and happy to take any questions, things like that. But that's what we're working on right now. COVID is, the dial keeps changing. There's lots of discussion on the mask ordinance at the state level, but we're waiting for clear direction there.
Great. Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
Questions, comments? Or anybody else have anything? Dan.
Nancy, thanks for the update. And I know everybody is working really hard to solve all the problems that were identified last year and some of which by the end of the promenade last year still had not been addressed. You know, making sure that we address those impacts along Granite, but we're, you know, and I know Jeff's working on those traffic plans. My big question is, you know, here we are almost end of March, and I'm going to assume again a cautiously optimistic trajectory of vaccination rates and overall public sentiment migrating towards one of at best a very laissez-faire attitude towards COVID restrictions. If we're seeing mask mandates removed or relaxed, if we're seeing social distancing requirements removed or relaxed to the degree that restaurants reasonably don't need Main Street space to achieve capacity. What's the sense of everybody on moving forward with this if that were to happen, say, by the end of the first week of June? And it's a hypothetical to some degree, but I don't think it's outside the realm of consideration. So basically the question is, absent COVID constraints or the compelling COVID imperative to try and create capacity where it's been taken away, would there still be the consensus be to still move forward with the promenade?
I'll chime in. First of all, thank you, Nancy, for that summary of Make Frisco and what we have underway. Dan and I, you and I have spoke. I've spoke to a few others and a few other business owners. And where I really land on this is I want us to be dynamic. That being said, there's certain things that we do need to really proactively, not necessarily lock in, but kind of commit to. So I would need some strong data to suggest reopening, if we go this direction, which we are at this point, reversing course. And so I think that we should follow it very closely. We should be dynamic as we were last summer, and really monitor the situation. Because I know there are some business owners that are very concerned about it not helping them, but actually hurting them this summer. So I fully support it. I've not changed my mind, but I do want to monitor it and make sure that it does not create harm for business owners on other parts of Main Street.
Thanks, Melissa. Andy.
Yeah, agreed. I have identified a number of businesses that feel that this actually hurts their business, and they feel that without the COVID, restriction intensity being there, then just the festival atmosphere with us giving businesses real estate to operate is unfair, and they would either like to take part, or they would like something more fair. And that gets into where we were last week or 2 weeks ago, sorry, when it's like, if we don't put the promenade up, does that hurt any businesses? Does every business thrive without the promenade, right? And just because we have a great time with a festival in the promenade, is it worth letting a few of those businesses thrive compared to the ones who feel that they're not? And that metric, I feel like, needs to be there. I think that we staff really needs to hit every business on Main Street and like get that real survey from businesses only. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Andrew.
Yeah, two things. One, on Promenade, Nancy, I hope that part of that business outreach engagement is including the businesses that aren't inside the fence, those that are outside, to create an environment that may be supportive of them, whether it's through, closing early, live music restrictions, whatever it may be, that an opportunity to have a tent inside the promenade, whatever it may be, that can help those that are outside the fence feel more included and more benefited. Then I hope those conversations have already started. On a different COVID note, we have in our community an army of volunteers that are showing up every day that there's a bus barn, a bus barn COVID mega event. And I just, some way or another, as a council, as a town, hope that we can acknowledge them. I don't know, my wife has volunteered and said they do supply them with lunch. I was thinking, we as a town need to acknowledge the effort that's going on to vaccinate our community, and it's mostly driven by volunteers. So if there's any outreach we can do to support them, to make them feel like they are, they feel good already, but whatever we can do to make that a better volunteer experience, the better. And it also leads to making sure, hopefully, everybody on this screen is at least either vaccinated or signed up to be vaccinated, because it's moving fast. So it's all really good things happening at the bus barn.
It's a phenomenal effort out there. I couldn't believe when I saw the whole thing going on.
I appreciate that and support that, Andrew. I think it would be great if we could do something to recognize them. As for the Dan's question in the promenade, I'm still, I look at the survey of 650 plus people, business owners, residents and guests, and overwhelmingly from the survey and from just personal interaction, I've had very, very few people come to me, reach out to me and say they don't fully support it, even those outside of the promenade and in all parts of the community. So I think Melissa's word is the most important, and that's dynamic. I do think we need to be that. I don't want to do any harm to any one business. And as Nancy said, we have options, and we can take it down when the time is right and when the numbers show, or when it's appropriate, or if it is doing harm. But as of right now, I guess I'm on the opposite end of the feedback loop from folks, and no one has really come to me fearful or angry or not in support of the promenade, not just from the COVID standpoint. I probably get more comments about doing it forever because it's such a community building attribute. So not that I'm suggesting that, but I'm just sharing the viewpoints of the folks that do reach out to me, and that is what we are doing well as this council, is representing those we talk to and those we know and those we interact with. And that's, I think, spurring good conversation. And so I'm still in full support. If things turn out that, masks are off and everything's great and back in the world, then we should, as a council, revisit taking it down. And if that means compensating all of the businesses for the money they put in to do it, or if we have hurt people, maybe we look at that. But at this point, I haven't heard any compelling reason from anybody who's come to me saying it's a bad idea for the community as a whole. So but let's be dynamic. I completely agree.
I'll call him. Then he can't say that.
I just want to remind council, we did do a survey, over 300 folks. We did drill down on those results, and we have it separated by business. Happy to resend those results as well. Okay, we'll resend them to you.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
100% follow up. And, I did go out and I started to engage retailers inside and outside the venue. And, at this point, not trying to change everybody's mind. I think everybody's very legitimate points about why they want to pursue it and why they think it works, and for whatever reason they've, that they've gained the traction that they have about moving it forward. And that's fine. I appreciate the consensus that I think I'm hearing about really monitoring the situation and continue to evaluate these very important metrics in terms of equity, in terms of opportunity, things of that nature as it proceeds, and identifying a time when we think we've transcended that threshold. But I would say, with regards to the survey, and I think this is important, the survey really asked a very general question about, do people like it? And even the retailers who I talked to inside the venue, their view was very focused on what they see out their storefront window. And in their world, there were people in front of them. It was good. And if I asked them the next obvious question, which is, well, what if scenario is, what if COVID constraints go away? What if there is an equity issue? What if, as we continue to pursue this promenade, there are effects outside of the venue that maybe you're not seeing? Can you step outside your position as a retailer and look at this from a net benefit to the community perspective? And it gave every single one of them pause. They had not thought of that. So they said, well, I don't know. I never stopped to think about it. The promenade was thrust upon me. I did what I needed to leverage. Like we all wanted them to do. They got innovative. They did some things. Some worked better than others. But to a person, nobody had a comment beyond neutral as to what the promenade meant to them community-wide post-COVID. So, and the survey did not address that, to be clear. So I want to keep the survey question and the results couched in the very narrow perspective in which it was asked. So, and that's all. Like you said, more data needs to be gathered. We got a lot of time to go. A lot of things are going to change between now and then. I'm happy to hear that people understand that this is going to take consistent, constant evaluation.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. And yes, I agree. Anything else COVID related?
Regarding the idea of Reaching out to the folks that are volunteering, do you have an idea? I mean, we can go to the county and, because I'm sure they're all through the county, and find out what their names are. Are you thinking?
Since I raised it, originally my thought was, when my wife said she was volunteering all day, was we provide lunch, but they were provided lunch. So that, I don't know how it's happening. It can just be a public proclamation. It does. I don't know. I just know that we should be doing something to acknowledge in some way, whether it's when I say monetary, meaning providing them with something, some Frisco swag, or just a proclamation saying, thank you very much for what you're doing.
That's helpful. Thanks so much.
I agree. Thanks, Andrew. Anything else before we think we're good on COVID discussion? All right, then next on the agenda is to enter into an executive session. We'll need a motion to enter into executive session. I just want to, before we do that, confirm that everybody has the email link for that session from Deborah, council member.
I do not.
That I will send it to you.
Thank you.
With that, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Mayor, I move to enter executive session.
I will need you to read the whole, the language in the memo, sorry, because it has a specific call out.
Yeah, don't anyone sign off. You gotta call for the vote.
Hang on. Mr. Mayor, I move to enter executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402, parenthesis 4, parenthesis A, to discuss the potential acquisition of certain real property, -519 Teller Street, number 5.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Fallon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. You call the question, please.
Certainly. Fallon,
Yes.
thank you. Held,
Yes.
Hinkin, absent. Sherburne,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley, absent.
Great, thank you. Let's meet in the executive session room at what time is it now? And let's give 8 minutes or so. We'll jump over there, give everybody a chance to find the email, log in, and 8 minutes. We've got to be exact, Nancy. All right, 10 if you'd like. And we'll jump over there and reconvene. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.